Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Tory. I'm the chair of the Executive Committee, and of course I serve in that role as the mayor. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, and I will call this the 19th meeting of the Executive Committee to order and welcome everyone. Today's meeting is being held by video conference. City staff are also connecting to the meeting by video conference. As City Hall remains closed, the public will continue to participate electronically in our proceedings and can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. I ask everyone for their patience in any delays that may take place or technical difficulties we experience. I think we've all got used to that during what has been a very prolonged pandemic. The clerk staff have also connected all registered speakers to the meeting by audio. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Executive Committee's page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. The City Clerk has provided all agenda materials via CMP, the Clerk's meeting portal, so it's available there. And the Clerk's IT staff will be available to participants to help with your devices if you're having trouble connecting with us. I'd like to remind staff to keep their mics muted and their videos turned off unless they are actually answering questions or need to speak to the committee. This will make it easier for me as chair and for those watching on YouTube to hear and to allow people to watch the members participate in the debate and in the questions as everything unfolds. Members, please as well, if you can, keep your mics muted unless you wish to question staff or to speak to an item, and ensure that your video is turned on when you do so. As part of each agenda item, I will ask members to raise their hands or unmute their mic if they wish to question staff or speak, and I will then create a speakers list here and will call on members when it is their turn to speak. When voting on an item or on a motion, I ask that members ensure that they turn on their video to raise their hand to indicate their vote. Members, I want to ask you to submit and approve your motions by email to remind you that that's the practice that we follow here. The staff are available at exc@toronto.ca to help with those motions. If there are any visiting members of council attending the meeting today, and I see at least one already, which is terrific, I would ask you that you also turn on your video so that I know you're here and can give you the opportunity to ask questions of staff or speak. This will assist the clerk staff in recording attendance at the meeting. Although we're in different locations and meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, including Inuit and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I will ask, as we are required to do at this meeting, whether there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. If you do have one, please raise your hand and unmute your mic. Looking at the screen, I see no such interest to be declared, so I would next then ask for a motion to confirm the minutes from our last meeting on November the 18th, 2020, moved by Councillor Pasternak. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Before we begin the rundown, I would like to add an item of new business. The proposed item is entitled Board's Independent Review into Missing Persons Investigations, Request to Extend Timeline and Increase Budget. This is a letter that came from the Toronto Police Services Board. I will ask the clerk to display the letter on the screen so that members can review it before voting on whether or not to add it to the agenda. We'll then put it at the bottom of the agenda so there'll be time, as people wish, to review the letter in substance. I will now move that this item be added to the agenda as an item of new business. And if you've just had a chance to see what it is there, I will now come back to the screen so I can see you all and call the question. To all those in favour? Opposed? Carried. So let's proceed with the agenda review. The first item is item EX 19.1, update report to City Council on recovery and building a renewed Toronto. We have one speaker registered on this item, so I will hold it down. The next item is EX 19.2, investing in Canada infrastructure program, COVID-19 resilience infrastructure stream. This is a staff report with recommendations. Is there anyone wishing to hold this item down? Seeing no one, then I will move the recommendations in the report, and perhaps we don't have to display those on the screen. I think you've all seen them in the material that's been distributed in advance, unless you want to. If seeing no one that wants to do that, I will just call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next item is item EX 19.3, policy analysis, potential design, and possible implementation of a vacant home tax in Toronto. We have a number of speakers registered on this staff report, which comes with recommendations, so I'll hold it down. Our next item is EX 19.4, update on Waterfront Toronto's Quayside project, and there is a staff report with a recommendation, and I understand there is at least one motion to be moved on that. Is there anybody who wants to hold this item down?
Thompson.
Held by Councillor Thompson, Deputy Mayor Thompson. So we'll move forward to the next item, which is item EX 19.5, update on the city's transit expansion projects, fourth quarter of 2020. There is a staff report with recommendations. We have speakers registered on this item, so I will hold it down. The next item is EX 19.6, 2021 tax-supported interim operating and capital budget estimates. There is a staff report with a recommendation. Would anyone like to hold this item down? Okay, then.
Move that, Mr. Mayor.
Pardon me, Councillor Crawford?
I can move the recommendation.
Councillor Crawford moves the recommendations in the report. If everybody's ready for the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next item is item EX 19.7, administrative amendment to reserve fund accounts. This is a staff report with recommendations. Would anyone like to hold this item down? If not, I would ask that Councillor Crawford would move the recommendations.
Yeah, so moved.
So moved by Councillor Crawford, and I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next item is item EX 19.8, the City of Toronto Investment Report for the 6-month period ending June 30th, 2020. Again, there's a staff report with a recommendation. If there's no one wanting to hold this item down, I would ask again Councillor Crawford for to move the recommendation contained in the report. Seeing no one wanting to hold it down, Councillor Crawford is so moved. May I ask for all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. The next item is EX 19.9, 2021 rate supported budget 2021 water and wastewater consumption rates and service fees. This is a letter coming from the Budget Committee with recommendations. There are no deputations on this. Might I ask if there's anyone wanting to hold this down?
I'll hold it, Mr. Mayor.
Held by Councillor Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
I don't have a lot of questions. I'm in agreement with the report. I simply wanted to take the opportunity really to thank the Water Department, water staff for dealing with a really important matter that occurred in my ward over the course of the weekend, where we lost water connection to homes because of a car accident. And I really wanted just to thank the staff for the superior work that they did in terms of restoring the water. And of course, the investment that we're making in this infrastructure is extremely important. That's all I really wanted to say, and just to thank them and say I'm in agreement with the report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. And just before I call the question then, unless there's others who want to say anything, because I think we can deal with it as we would call it, as a quick release. You know, people, one of the things that you take for granted when you live in a big city, and I consider it still to be one of the great miracles of any city, is that you have this incredible network of pipes that run under the ground into everybody's house, and that you have then the plants and you have the people who work in all these plants to provide us with safe water that turns on every morning. I mean, you just do take it for granted. You go and turn that tap up on to brush your teeth, and there the water is. And the same is true of the wastewater that goes away when you open the drain or flush the toilet. And I think we should express our gratitude in approving this budget, as well as our gratitude, as I mentioned this morning to the media, in the fact that those people have been able to bring in rate increases that are below what was projected by us a number of years ago at 1.5% as a gesture of solidarity with the people who pay those bills, who themselves in many cases are struggling this year. So I want to thank the staff for all the hard work keeping the water safe and keeping the wastewater treated and safe, and for all the work they do and all the the construction projects that are going to make sure that continues off into the future. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the members of the committee in saying that. And if there's no one else wanting to add to that, and to Councillor Thompson's remarks about the kinds of emergencies they deal with week in and week out, and they deal with it very well, I will call the question on these budgets, this budget.
So, Mr. Mayor.
There's Councillor
Yeah,
Crawford.
no, just again, I don't want to hold this item. I don't want to have staff sitting around all day, but I just want to echo the comments that you made on the incredible work that Lou and the team have been doing over the last year, and just to echo the fact that they are bringing the rates lower than what was anticipated, but keeping all the service levels, keeping the capital going. And the big thing, when you look at our capital plan over the next number of years, right now it's a couple $2 billion. They're going to bring our state of good repair down to about $300 million by 2030, which is an incredible accomplishment that they've been doing. So I just want to give them a hats off for the amazing work that they've been doing in a challenging year. Thank
you very much, Councillor Crawford. And coming from the budget chief, that praise is not distributed easily, so that is a high commendation. If there's nothing else to be said, then what we'll do is call the question on item EX 19.9, the rate supported budget for 2021 water and wastewater. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 19.10 now actually has one speaker, and so I will hold that down. That is the 2021 rate supported budgets for solid waste management services and recommended 2021 solid waste rates and fees. So there is one speaker on that, so we will hold that down. Item EX 19.11, 2021 rate supported budgets Toronto Parking Authority. Again, this is a letter from the Budget Committee with recommendations. Is there anyone who wants to hold this item down? If not, then
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to.
Yep, go ahead.
I don't want to hold it down, but if I can just do again, 20 or 30 seconds just to thank the Parking Authority. It's been a challenging year for, as you can appreciate, the Parking Authority. In many respects, just with the huge loss of revenue, we will not be receiving our $55 million amount coming this year. But recognizing that, I think they've done a good job and good work under the circumstances this last year. With hopes that it'll be a better 2021 when we're looking at the revenues. So I just want to thank, again, everyone on the Parking Authority for the work that they've been doing and appreciate, the continued support moving into the new year.
Thanks, Councillor Crawford.
Move the items.
And Councillor Crawford has moved the recommendation for approval of the Parking Authority rate-supported budget. I'll call the question. If there's no one else, all in favour? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 19.12. The municipal land transfer tax rebate for first-time homebuyers. This is a letter from the Budget Committee with a recommendation. Is there anyone wishing to hold this item down? Okay, otherwise then I'll ask for a motion from the Budget Chief, since it's his letter coming from his committee, to move the recommendations contained in the staff report. So moved, Councillor Crawford. Thank you. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 19.13, project cost adjustments and deferrals, accelerations to the Parks, Forestry and Recreation 2020 capital budget and 2021 to 2029 capital plan. Again, a letter from the Budget Committee with recommendations. I describe these things more as housekeeping, but important housekeeping nonetheless. Is there anyone who wishes to hold this item? If not, I'll ask Councillor Crawford then to recommend what's recommended in the letter from the Budget Committee. So moved. Any further discussion? All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 19.14, capital variance report for the 12 months ended December 31st, 2019. Again, a letter from the Budget Committee with a recommendation, and it's a variance report that's for the end of last year, and for a variety of reasons, those have taken this long to come to us. Is there anyone wishing to hold this item? All right. Otherwise, I will ask again Councillor Crawford, since this is coming from the Budget Committee, to move the recommendation. And I'll call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. The next item is item 19.15, operating variance report for the year ended December 31st, 2019. I believe, Councillor Crawford, there are some motions on this that are in front of us. They're maybe not in front of us.
Actually, I think it's the 9-month.
Okay, fine. You're right. Yep.
Staff can correct me.
So this again you're quite right. This again is the operating variance report for the year ended December 31st, 2019, coming from the Budget Committee with recommendations. If there is no one wishing to hold this down or to speak, I will ask Councillor Crawford to move the recommendations. And they have been so moved. Sure. And I'll call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. The next item is the EX 19.16 capital variance report for the 9 months ended September 30th, 2020. Again, a letter from the Budget Committee with a recommendation. Anyone wishing to hold this item down? Okay, seeing no one, then I'll ask the budget
So moved
chief
again.
again to move this. So moved. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next item is the one on which I think there are some motions, Councillor Crawford. I don't want to rush people in looking at these. Perhaps we'll hold this down and just deal with those motions at that time. There's just two motions I think you
Sounds
have.
good. They're just technical in nature from staff.
I mean, if people are content, they're very short. We can put them up now and you can have a quick look at them. They're really just things that direct certain adjustments to be made that are not, I mean, they're large amounts of money as everything is around here, but
No net impact in any way.
yeah, it's zero net impact. Are people content? You should have a quick look at these on the screen now and we can then move ahead with the item. Okay, so if I ask the clerk to put motion A up. So this is directing some lease termination payments to be made out of a stabilization fund. We return back to the reserve, actually returning the funds to the reserve with accounting adjustments to be made. It's a technical amendment. If there's any discussion on that, I'm of course willing to entertain it. Otherwise, I'll ask the question on that motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. But motion B, if we could put it up, is smaller, zero net, $355,000 for increasing the approved 2020 budget for children's services on a one-time in-year adjustment that has to do with startup costs for a facility. Okay, so if you've had a chance to look at that, that is so moved. And if I can call the question, unless there are any comments on this motion B, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then we would move then to approval of the item EX 19.17 as amended. And that's for the operating variance report for the 9 months ended September 30th. Moved by Councillor Crawford as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Next is item EX 19.18, Toronto Fire Services Amendment to the 2020 approved capital budget and the 2021 to 22 cash flows, Station B Downsview and personal protection equipment replacement. This is a staff report with recommendations. Anybody wanting to hold this item down? Councillor Pasternak. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I would
Yeah.
I don't have to really hold it. I just wanted to make a very brief comment and then
Please
I
go
can
ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank Toronto Fire Services for how organized and accelerated the construction is going in the Downsview Fire Station. Mr. Mayor, you may recall we were at the design reveal event in the summertime. A magnificent plan to keep the Downsview community safe. And I wanted to also take this opportunity to thank Toronto Fire Services for their quick response to a fire that occurred in some townhomes under construction right around the corner from where this station is being built. Their quick response last weekend in a very difficult fire situation resulted in a minimum spreading of the fire to other townhomes which were occupied, and of course, the likely prevention of injury and fatalities. So just a shout out to Toronto Fire Services as I see this project is mentioned in this capital report and for all the great work they're doing on site.
Thank you, Councillor Pasternak. I'm sure that's all concurred in by the members of the committee as well. If there are no other comments, I will ask for someone, well, Councillor Pasternak, I'm sure you're prepared to move the recommendations contained in the staff report. And I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 19.19, Equity Responsive Budgeting at the City of Toronto. This is a letter from the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee with a recommendation for benefit of our viewers at home. These committees have to be, some of the recommendations have to be given life in terms of directing staff and so on from a standing committee, in this case the executive committee, and that's what this is, to give life to their recommendations. Is there anybody wanting to hold this item? If not, then I'll ask for a motion to move the staff recommendation, moved by Deputy Mayor Thompson. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item is EX 19.20, Remote Participation in Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee meetings. Again, a letter coming from the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee with recommendations on the subject matter listed in the title. If there are no one wishing to hold it down, I'll ask for someone to move the recommendations. Councillor Ainsley, thank you. And I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 19.21, Toronto Public Health's response and efforts related to COVID-19. This again is a letter from the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee with recommendations. Anybody wanting to hold this down? Okay, seeing no one, I will ask then for a mover of the staff recommendations. I see Councillor Deputy Mayor Thompson, and I'll call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. The next item is EX 19.22, Wheel-Trans update on public consultation and COVID-19 response. Again, a letter coming from the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee with recommendations. Do I see anyone wanting to hold this down? You want to hold it down, Francis? Councillor Nunziata?
Move it.
Move it. Moving the staff recommendations,
yes.
Or the
yes.
recommendations from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Ready to call the question then? All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. And then the last item is the item EX 19.23, Board's independent review into missing persons investigations, request to extend timeline and increase budget. I don't know if you've had any time to look at the letter because it's fairly routine. It involves, again, I consider $70,000 to be a large sum of money, let alone $700,000, but it concerns an extension to the budget to let them complete their work and proposes a time deadline of this spring on something that I think you'll find is a landmark report in terms of both missing persons and other police practices, because I've had a chance to understand what their work is. But I'm not trying to rush. If you'd like me to leave it down, I can leave it down and we can come back just when people have a chance to receive it. I'm in your hands on that. People want to have a chance to look at it, or is somebody ready to move the... Francis seems ready to move the Councillor Nunziata the recommendations, and I'll assume that we have that. That was the disposition. The clerk is quite right that the recommendation here is actually not to approve it, but rather to refer the item as per request to the Budget Committee for consideration in the 2021 budget process. All the more reason why we can deal with it now as opposed to waiting until later. So I assume, Councillor Nunziata, you're quite happy to move that motion referring this item to the Budget Committee for their consideration in the 2021 budget process. Go back to the other screen if we can. You okay with that, Councillor Nunziata?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So I'm ready to call the question on that. Then it's sending off to the Budget Committee. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Now, I think we also had a motion we wanted to put in front of you, which I've conveniently misplaced here somewhere. But it was a motion that was to indicate that we will hear from all registered speakers, but that it's going to be on the screen. There it is. That we just indicate that all speakers who have not pre-registered to be allowed to register to speak until 10 a.m. So we've got 4 more minutes. Be allowed to speak, after which no further registration will be allowed and the speakers list would be closed. And so can I have a person to move that? Moved by Councillor Pasternak. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. If there's nothing else then, I think that allows us to move back to the first item, EX 19.1, update report to City Council on recovery and rebuilding of renewed Toronto, the TOR report as it's known around here. And I would ask that we could confirm that the first speaker, and that is Guillermo Gil Penalosa from 880 Cities World Urban Parks, is on the line? Not on the line. Okay, well, what we'll do is see if there's any questions of staff or speakers on this and give Mr. Penalosa a moment to make himself available. Are there any people wishing to ask questions of staff on this TOR report? Seeing none, are there any? Deputy Mayor Thompson, did you want to ask a question, or you wanted to ask a question of staff?
Yes, question of staff, Mr. Mayor.
Just Councillor McKelvey, you're a visiting member still, although soon to join us, which will be great. But you would go first if you had any questions of staff on this. Otherwise, we'll go to Deputy Mayor Thompson.
No, I'm here for 19.5, but thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Thompson, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just some general questions for staff. The report looks at a variety of things, and obviously the title of the report is, responding to the TOR. And I know that it was only a very short time ago that we actually have the actual report itself. I'm just wondering, from the city manager, through you, Mr. Mayor, what are any of the unique elements that you are wanting to update us on as it relates to this report? I mean, areas like impact on businesses, areas like PPEs and so on. Just wondering if, maybe just highlight those specific areas.
Yes, if I can, through Mayor Tory. Yeah, there's an appendix that outlines the progress that we've made on the 83 recommendations that were part of the TOR report. So that does detail some of the movement that we've made since October. Yes, in terms of PPE, we're fortunate that procurement has been going quite well. We don't have any what we would call as red or amber lights on any of that stock, so that's moving well. Also, what's moving well is the discussions with the federal and provincial government. We've had an opportunity to meet with a number of senior leaders, and their view of our call for a whole of government approach is being quite well received. So as you would hope, meetings are being set up. We're talking about a variety of matters, everything from the role of the City of Toronto in the digital economy, and in particular digital infrastructure. So, and I do want to mention though as well, Deputy Mayor Thompson, the work that you've been doing with the task force, and that we received a report from you, I believe, on Monday, which I think augments nicely the TOR recommendations. And so we'll be incorporating those recommendations into any of our work that we're going to report on each quarter of 2021 and beyond. So there's a number of really good suggestions there for businesses. We particularly like the suggestion around a dashboard addressing employment and major equity challenges that people are facing. So there's a lot of good information in our report today, but we will be building on that per the task force that you chaired and have led. And so we're incorporating that work with us as well.
Thank you very much. Just with respect to looking forward and our employees coming back to work, just wondering what are some of the measures that you're looking at through the TOR report in terms of testing, engine testing, and a variety of other testing and testing our employees and so on. And I imagine that this is in collaboration with the medical officer of health and so on. I just wonder if you could just give us some insight on that aspect.
Well, through Mayor Tory, thank you for that question. I mean, as we've said from day one, our what's of paramount importance to us are the health and safety of our workers. So, making sure that they're respecting all the public health measures that Dr. Davila has advised us and everyone else in this community, but also as we see in our long-term care facilities and other critical areas where we know outbreaks can be devastating. I mean, there is a testing regime that does go on there to keep our staff and our clients safe. I mean, the other matter here, which we're working through right now, is, and we don't have details to share just yet, is the whole matter of the vaccine in terms of how, who in our organization it might apply to, and whether or not it's something that we would make mandatory is something we're still looking at. So, but yes, you're right. There's, testing, especially now we know how the virus is kicking up in our community and causing us a lot of concern. We will have protocols in place to keep our staff safe as they interact with the public.
Thank you very much, Mr. City Manager, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Are there other members, Deputy Mayor Bylaw? And Councillor Pasternak, I see you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, my questions are quite specific. On the human services integration, I noticed that you mentioned some projects that have been accelerated. How are we doing with the human services integration?
So I might defer that to Alma if she's on the line here to talk about specifics. May have to hold your time.
Sorry.
Maybe Juliana can jump in?
Or
Can you hear me now?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think what you're referring to, Deputy Mayor, is the human services integration with regard to the income supports. And we're working very closely on advancing that. We have the central intake number. We've centralized the unit up at one of the offices. They're working very closely together in terms of how we can amalgamate or harmonize our review of eligibility, et cetera. But we're also working right now very closely with the province because they're also looking at centralizing certain aspects of Ontario Works and possibly other elements. And as we get more information on that, we can provide updates to you.
So has this been some work that has been advanced as well? Because I mean, I think that as we recover, leveraging these benefits for the people that have been affected the most is of crucial importance, correct?
It is. I'm going to see if Denise or Tom is on because they have more details on the advances that they've made.
We're waiting to see if Denise is there somewhere. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah. Denise, are you there? Deputy Mayor, I'll get you details and I'll get them emailed to you. My apologies.
Thank you.
Is that,
Another question I had is you talked about the nonprofit long-term cares and the work that you're doing. And there's a report supposed to come in 2021 on the possibility of the development charges. Can you be a little bit more specific on when are we expecting this work?
So we're working very closely with finance on that. Finance is the lead and we're providing input. I'm not sure if Heather's on. It's the first half of 2021 is my recollection, Deputy Mayor.
I saw Ms. Taylor's name come up, so maybe she just was trying to say something there.
Yes, I am here. Sorry, Deputy Mayor, if you could repeat your question.
There's a section that talks about the work that was
Okay, we're having one of those technical moments. There we are.
Long-term care ACs.
I don't think that question came through because I didn't hear much of it. You came back at the end of it. Could you just try one more time, Deputy Mayor Barlow, to repeat the question? No, she's got in a freeze up again. Okay, we'll move on from that.
Speak to her offline.
We can come back to her or otherwise take that question offline. Were there other? I think we had Councillor Pasternak and then we had Councillor Nunziata for questions. So Councillor Pasternak, you'd be next.
Try.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff.
There's
hang on. Sorry, Councillor Barlow's back. Deputy Mayor Barlow's back, and so maybe it's freezing up again, though, Councillor Deputy Mayor. So maybe what we could do is see about that connection, and we'll come back to you. And I'll start your time. You're at 3 minutes, and I'll start again with a couple of minutes left, and we'll go to Councillor Pasternak in the meantime. Councillor Pasternak, you please go ahead.
Great. Okay, we'll try again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through you to staff, I guess I'm looking at attachment 1 of the report, the Rapid Housing Initiative, and I'm looking at the timelines tied to this, where construction must be completed within 12 months, no later than December 31st, 2021, so something like a year from now. How far along are we on these conditions of acquisition of land in existing buildings, acquisition of land and rehabilitation of housing? Have we identified projects and are they shovel ready?
So through the mayor, we're going to have Abby respond to that question.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So we are waiting to hear back from CMHC any day now about our submission that we made on November the 27th, which included 7 properties for the purposes of the Rapid Housing Initiative, plus some additional projects on behalf of our non-profit partners, and we are progressing still on the due diligence for a number of those for acquisition and conversions, and also a number of properties for the purposes of modular as well. The modular properties is on land that's already owned by the city, so it's about expediting the design work and the application process as we did for modular phase 1. And then on the acquisition and conversions, we're continuing to move ahead on the properties that we're exploring. And part of the reason why we applied for those properties is because we think that we can acquire those properties and do the conversion within the timeline that's been set by CMHC, which is extremely tight, as you know. It's 1 year from approval. So yes, it's challenging and difficult, but we're very, very focused on making it happen.
I mean, most people, I guess, can't get a kitchen renovation done in this timeline. But you're confident you can get it done.
We're pulling out all the stops to make it happen. Yeah, this kind of funding from the federal government is something that we've been asking for a long time. It provides 100% of the capital costs, and so it's very important to us that we're able to succeed and deliver this in the timeline that they've identified.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor Pasternak. Next, we'll come back to Deputy Mayor Bylaw and see how our internet's going. But next, we will go on the speakers list to Councillor Nunziata.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, okay. Just a question on, in the report on customer service, digital government and services. Part of the report talks about the divide in Toronto by bringing access to affordable high-speed internet to underserved residents. If you can just comment on that, please.
Sure, through the mayor. Josie will address this.
Through the chair, thank you, Councilor Nunziata. And what we are bringing, and this will come actually in January, is a report that will be coming to exec committee regarding utilizing our assets, which we have assets across the city, which is like broadband fiber that could actually support some of the underserved areas. In particular, in a couple of pilots we're actually going to be bringing forward. So that report will actually come as a pilot to committee. And then what we'll be doing is actually putting an RFP out to the market to actually assist us in what they call the last mile, so we can actually have households in underserved areas where they can't do online learning easily, and that we can actually look at accessibility as well as affordability and work with some of the partners that may actually respond to the RFP. So your question is extremely important. This will be coming back to the exec committee for review and approval to move forward with.
So as you know, Toronto Housing at the last meeting adopted a report to look at it in their for their tenants.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Josie, then if I want to bring forward a motion, I should wait till January when the report comes to executive to add on a recommendation onto your report?
Absolutely, and we'll work with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bylaw. Now, was there anyone else wishing to ask questions on this report? Okay, of staff. So now, do I see Deputy Mayor Bylaw anywhere? I don't see her on my screen here, but oh, there you are. Did you log back on, or I wonder if your internet's working better? We could give you a couple more minutes because you had 2 minutes left. You were right in the middle of a question. I think.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yes, and I think you're right in the middle of a question to Ms. Taylor. But yeah, I'll set you up for 2 minutes, and you can use it as you see fit, obviously.
Yeah, just a quick question around the report that's supposed to come in 2021 about long-term care homes and development charges. It talks about 2021, but can we be a bit more specific?
That's a question of
Mr. Chair.
There we are. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, I'm so sorry. So Deputy Mayor, I will get back to you offline. I don't have that specific timeline. I'll check with the team and get back to you. And I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question first time around.
No problem. The last question is, I mean, we're now getting more and more information about the deployment of the vaccine and findings and when we expect the vaccine to be done in the population. How are you taking that in consideration in your work plan?
Well, as you can imagine through the mayor, first off, there's roles and responsibilities of the federal and provincial government, and we are certainly going to play our position, our role as they request. But there is a fairly large team of people that are engaged right now on determining locations for the vaccine to be brought to. Dissemination strategy that is being overseen by Chief Pegg in consultation with Dr. Davila. So as we know, and there will be, as you would expect, trial runs of all of this before the vaccine actually shows up for broad distribution. But we are certainly playing our position relative to what the federal and provincial government wants us to do. But just to be rest assured that we have a group of people that are making sure that our end of the responsibility is worked through and tested, and whenever the vaccine does show up, we'll be ready to distribute it as per the protocol, which will be set up by the other levels of government.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, does your table look at, there has to be a certain amount of people that has been vaccinated, the numbers have to come down to a certain degree in order for us to start, bringing people back to downtown? Is that how it's going to work? There's going to be an evaluation to then start getting back to normal?
Yeah, through the mayor. I mean, that question was raised, in the last few meetings. The federal government, I think, is using the 70% figure of a population of an urban area like Toronto. I mean, north of 70 is preferred because it will have very positive effects on us being able to return to a more normal interactions with people. And so, and of course, to get that message across, and it's a great question right now, we'll require some form of campaign. Obviously, that's going to be led by the feds and the province. But, again, that's a really important point to make. And so that all those kinds of considerations are being worked into the strategy that, we are going to deploy. But again, all I can say right now is that, we are certainly in daily contact with the province in terms of just their expectations of us.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Deputy Mayor Bailão. I think that completes the questions of staff. And so if we can move on then to see if there are people wishing to speak on this item. There's Deputy Mayor Thompson to speak first, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I simply wanted to take the opportunity, certainly, to thank the city manager and his team and all the amazing people that are working to not only instill confidence, but also the leadership that is being brought to respond to the pandemic and the efforts that are being made. And certainly your leadership, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a given, but the leadership of so many people. But the role of Mr. Murray and his team has just been absolutely amazing. And I think that the level of confidence that he brings to the table, as is important to give Torontonians that understanding that not only is their government working on their behalf, the administration is working well. Mr. Murray has brought forward, obviously, this report, and he'll be bringing more reports forward as it relates to all of the work that's actually being done with respect to the efforts on recovery, rebuild, and renewal. And we know that through the work that's being done, Mr. Murray is guided by a number of supportive team staff members, but also a variety of different work that's actually being done, which I think Torontonians can actually take great comfort in recognizing that the political leadership is strong, but also the civic administration is also really strong and is actually up to the challenge. And as we approach the holidays and so on, and we continue to ask people to refrain from gathering and, making certain demands on them, which is very difficult during this period when normally people would gather during the holidays and so on. I think it gives great comfort in terms of the recognition and understanding that so much more is actually being done. And I think that we need to ensure that we recognize that every effort's actually being made to ensure the health and safety and welfare of all Torontonians as a first course of action, and at the same time looking at all of our financial challenges and looking at the opportunities in terms of working with other governments and looking at how we can identify infrastructure development, responding to business need and dealing with the issues with respect to PPEs and so on and so forth. So there is a comprehensive collective approach in terms of dealing and responding to the issues and the challenges that this city face. And the last point I really wanted to make, though, it is the city manager's effort in terms of collaborating with the region and the regional municipalities in terms of looking at how we all work together. And if it's one thing that this pandemic has demonstrated to us as we look at all the gaps and all the challenges that we've had, if we don't actually work together in a collective way, both politically and in the administration, then I don't think that we will fully rebuild and recover as we're planning to do. And I'm just really delighted that and confident with respect to Mr. Murray's leadership and all of the people that are working. Staff have worked really hard. And I think oftentimes we tend to overlook this in the efforts that they've made. So I simply wanted, as we approach the holidays and the challenges that we still face, wanting just to offer my vote of confidence and thanks to Mr. Murray team and certainly to you, Mr. Mayor, and all the members of the committee. Those are my remarks that I wanted to add to this particular agenda item, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, and I can move the item.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Are there others wishing to speak on this? Okay, well, I will simply say I echo all of the Deputy Mayor's comments, with the exception of the comments about myself, but this has just been a great effort with much more to be done, of course, and we're working on things as we speak, especially for some of the people that have been harder hit by the pandemic and trying to move forward from there. So Deputy Mayor Thompson has moved the recommendation, and I will call the question since I see no one else wishing to speak. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So that is item 19.1. I think next we would move then, well, it doesn't matter. I was too late. I was going to see if we had Mr. Penelez. Did he ever? No, he didn't materialize, so that's fine. Okay. Then we move to 19.3, the policy analysis, potential design, and possible implementation of a vacant home tax in Toronto. And I think as our usual practice, we'll hear from the deputants first, of which there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. And so we'll deal with those, and we'll start off with is Jacko Joubert on the line. So Jacko Joubert, you are up first. 5 minutes, and you're most welcome here.
Hey, thank you for having me. So last year, I published some research I completed on vacant condos in the downtown core. I analyzed the life patterns of condos over several months and then determined what percentage of units were empty and unused. While I was initially skeptic, the results convinced me that Toronto has a pretty serious problem. Some buildings were exceeding 13% vacancy rate. On average, I found about 5.6% vacancy rate. Among the 15 buildings that I looked at, with approximately 1,300 units between them. And then some of the buildings that are renowned for being ghost hotels had the lowest rates at around 1.5 to 1.8%. Yet since the onset of the pandemic, those same buildings have posted the most units for sale and rent. The city has identified ghost hotels as a problem and enacted regulations to curb them. We need similar regulations to stop the practice of treating homes as investment vehicles and land banks. The City of Vancouver enacted a vacancy tax of 0.8% and then raised it for 2020 to 1.25%. I think they made a mistake and we should not repeat it. We should start with a rate that is effective and causes changes. If it is less than the asset depreciation, then it is largely a meaningless tax. So I would ask you to consider a rate of at least 5% per year direct the money to raising or creating more affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joubert. Are there questions of the deputant? Okay, seeing none, I will thank you very much for being with us today and for sharing those thoughts. We've been taking careful account of those, as we will all the others. Next, it would move to Jack Campbell. Is Mr. Campbell on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Good morning, sir. You have 5 minutes, and there may be some questions. Up to 5 minutes. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Jack, and I'm a young adult from Ward 10. I'm here today to thank the city for considering a vacant homes tax and to encourage you to implement the tax at a rate of at least 3%. As a young person, like many in our city, I'm concerned about the future of affordability in Toronto. I've been fortunate enough to grow up in this city, but now I question whether I will be able to stay here as I grow older. Rapidly rising housing prices and the housing crisis that our city is currently facing are making the future more and more uncertain for young people like myself, who are going through school and entering into the job market. The recent emergence of COVID-19 has only made these concerns greater. It is clear to me, as it is to so many others in our city, that if nothing is done to address the state of housing affordability in Toronto soon, many who live here will be forced to move out of our city. I don't want to have to leave the place where I grew up and the place I call home, and I don't want my friends or anyone else to be forced out of the city either. That is why I was very excited when I heard the city would be considering the idea of a vacant homes tax. It is vital that every housing unit in Toronto is used for just that, housing. We cannot afford to have housing units in the city sitting empty when so many are struggling to find places to live already. I believe that a vacant homes tax is a necessary step the city must take to address affordability. Seeing City Council considering the tax is therefore encouraging. With that being said, after reviewing the city's report for action, I was disappointed to see that only a 1% tax was considered in the report's scenarios. I don't think that this goes far enough. The City of Vancouver, which implemented its own vacant homes tax in 2017, currently has its tax set at 3%. I would like to ask, why can't we do the same? Even the KPMG report, considered in the city's report for action, notes that a 1% vacant homes tax may not impact investor returns sufficiently for vacant homeowners to transfer their properties to the market, given how fast home prices are increasing. If we are going to implement this tax, we should make sure that it is set high enough to accomplish its goal. We should be bold, we should be ambitious and set our tax at 3% as they have done in Vancouver. With issues of housing insecurity on the rise and the future of the economy uncertain, the people of Toronto are looking to you, our mayor, and our elected officials to take bold action to make the future a little less uncertain for everyone who lives here. A vacant homes tax is a great initiative, but I think that we can do better than the 1% tax considered in the city's report for action. I reiterate, the city should implement the tax at 3%. We need to shift as many vacant properties to the market as we can to help make the future of our city affordable like it should be. Because I don't want to see myself, my friends, nor anyone else pushed out of Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, Mr. Campbell. Are there any questions of the deputy? Councillor McKelvey, are you unmuting yourself, or no questions? No, okay. No questions of the deputy. Then I'll move on and thank Mr. Campbell very much for his attendance. Next, we would move to Fiza Khalid.
So I didn't want to do that, so I did it on Tuesday.
Sorry.
Okay, so I wasn't sure because I know that you like kind of.
Is that?
So everything is done. I can give you kind of like send you back the.
Who's talking?
The PowerPoint with like all of the.
The deputy that's actually on.
If that helps, if you want to look over it, so double check, or maybe. Okay.
Okay. Fiza Khalid.
In terms of one-on-one here, like a bunch. Yeah. And then I think you just need to be careful that in some of the like if it gets moved.
Maybe we'll move on to the next one. There's some problem here. Carol Arundel. Is Carol Arundel on from Social Planning Toronto?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody.
Over to you. It's your turn. 5 minutes, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Carol Arundel. I'm the Interim Executive Director of Social Planning Toronto. I'm here today to join with the other deputants that have spoken so far in offering kudos to the city for bringing forward this proposal for a vacant homes tax. In addition to urging you to support the tax, I'd like to make two main points in my deputation today. The first is that we would like you to dedicate the revenues from this tax to new and affordable and supportive housing. We all know about the crisis in rental and supportive housing. Over the last 10 years, the waiting list for affordable housing has grown by 50%, and it's almost quadrupled for supportive housing. There are more than 100,000 households on the waiting list, and shelters remain at capacity despite, the new beds you've added and the facilities that have been added to the system. The need for housing far outstrips our collective efforts and our funding to expand the system. Just over 4,000 units were built in the last decade. Our recent report, Spaces and Places of Exclusion, highlighted inequities in the rental housing market for immigrant and racialized residents. And the report recognized that addressing the housing crisis is not just a matter of universal human rights, it's also a matter of racial justice. The vacant homes tax is a really important tool that's available to the city to address Toronto's housing crisis. Vancouver has used their money, estimated $61 million, to fund 270 new units of affordable housing. The tax in Vancouver has also brought more units back to the rental market. It's estimated there's been about a 20% reduction in vacant units over the 3 years that the tax has been in effect. Last January, Social Planning Toronto produced a report called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It made some recommendations to address the city's housing crisis, including the introduction of a vacant home tax with revenues dedicated to affordable and supportive housing. And we urge you again today to dedicate the revenues from this tax to support new and affordable social housing in Toronto. And this, our recommendation is consistent with the Housing TO 2020 action plan and your commitment to supportive and affordable housing. My second point is that 1% tax in Toronto is too low, and we encourage you to implement a higher 3% tax. We often talk about best practices. There's some learnings that we can benefit from Vancouver. They started off lower, they increased the tax, and now they're increasing it to 3% in 2021. Let's benefit from their experience and learnings, and let's start at a 3% tax rate. In conclusion, Vancouver's shown us that vacant home tax can work. It brings more housing back into the rental market, and it raises funds to support new, affordable, and supportive housing. Thank you again for your leadership in bringing it forward. We hope you will continue to demonstrate strong leadership by supporting the tax today, by dedicating it to affordable and supportive housing, and by amending the proposal before you to implement a higher tax rate of 3%. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Arundel. Are there any questions for this, pardon me, for this deputant? Well, seeing none, I will thank you very much for those very concise and thoughtful recommendations. Appreciate that. We would move on then. Is Annie Hodgins on the line? Annie Hodgins from the Centre for Equality, Rights and Accommodation. Ms. Hodgins, you're up next. You have 5 minutes or any part that you want to use, and there may be some questions. Thank you for being here.
Great, thank you. So thanks for the opportunity to speak with the committee this morning. My name is Annie Hodgins, and I'm the Operations Manager at the Centre for Equality, Rights and Accommodation, or CERA. CERA is a nonprofit that works to make sure everyone has an affordable, accessible, and adequate home. We've been working to advance the right to housing in Toronto and Ontario for over 30 years. And we do this by providing services to people who are facing eviction or a human rights issue in their housing, by delivering public education and capacity building, and by working to advance rights-based housing policy that addresses the issues people face at a systemic level. So I'm happy to be here today to talk about the vacant homes tax. So a little bit of context, while skyrocketing housing prices are creating unprecedented wealth for real estate investors across Toronto, we know that thousands of low and moderate income renters are struggling to afford adequate housing, and many are facing the threat of eviction. The stark contrast is partly the result of increased financialization of housing in Toronto, where housing is viewed as a commodity to be bought, sold, and left vacant by investors, rather than as a social good and human right that provides security, dignity, and community to our city's residents. The city has recently taken some really positive steps towards the progressive realization of the right to housing for the people of Toronto. Today, we're calling on the city to continue along this path by adopting the structural measures that are needed to curb the financialization and commodification of housing that's distorting our housing system in Toronto. This effort should start with the implementation of a vacant homes tax. So as was just said by the previous deputant, Vancouver's experience with implementing a vacant homes tax has shown how effective this policy tool can be in reducing the number of vacant homes, increasing the supply of rental homes, curbing financialization, and generating revenue for affordable housing initiatives. Vancouver's vacant homes tax has been successful in improving the affordable housing outlook in that city, and it's made sure that residents have greater access to the housing they need. So CIRA urges the city to follow Vancouver's lead, and we offer the following recommendations based on lessons learned from Vancouver's experience. CIRA supports the adoption and implementation of a vacant homes tax to help increase the supply of rental housing and generate revenue that can be used to fund Toronto's affordable housing initiatives. To achieve these worthy policy outcomes, the city should make sure the vacant homes tax is set at a rate high enough to compel property owners to place vacant homes on the rental market. The City of Vancouver has learned this lesson and is set to increase their vacant homes tax to 3% from 1.2%, so that owners of vacant homes are incentivized to place these homes on the rental market. Given how quickly housing values are appreciating across Toronto, CIRA recommends the city reevaluate the vacant homes tax rate each year to decide if a higher rate might be necessary to achieve the desired policy outcome of increased rental housing supply. We also recommend that Toronto follow Vancouver's lead and make sure that revenue generated from a vacant homes tax is used to fund affordable housing initiatives and support for tenants. As noted in the KPMG study, the city does not currently have reliable data on the number of vacant homes across Toronto, so we urge the city to adopt Vancouver's practice of collecting and monitoring vacancy, availability, affordability, and other data that can be gathered through a vacant homes tax reporting requirements. Finally, we recommend that the city review a vacant homes tax as one policy tool, view a vacant homes tax as one policy tool among a potential series of policies that could meaningfully curb financialization in Toronto and move the city closer to fulfilling its commitment to the progressive realization of the right to housing. The homes left vacant by investors are not generally affordable for lower and moderate income renters. On its own, a vacant homes tax won't transfer enough homes to the market or generate enough revenue to meet the demand for affordable housing or fully fund the city's affordable housing initiatives. As the KPMG study noted, a vacant homes tax can't be used in isolation to meet the growing need for affordable and adequate housing across Toronto. So now is the time to encourage intergovernmental and interdivisional coordination to look at how a vacant homes tax can fit within the city's broader housing policy landscape so that we can end rampant financialization and ensure safe, adequate, and affordable housing for all of Toronto's residents. So thanks very much for the opportunity to speak with you this morning.
Thank you very much. We'll just see if there's any questions for you. I don't hear any questions, but we thank you very much for your suggestions and for your support of the principle of what we're dealing with here today. And so we'll move on. Let me just go back and see if it's Khalid, did that get sorted out, or where are we there?
You have vacation, so I was wondering if you still want to do your one-on-ones with Andrew and...
Oh, okay, she's all right. Well, we'll okay, all right. We'll just keep moving here, and then we'll give 3 chances, and then we'll have to move forward. Next would be Jonathan Robart on behalf of Right to Housing in Toronto. Is Mr. Robart on the line? Okay, Mr. Robart, good morning.
Hi there. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. So you've got 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes to make your deputation. There may be some questions, but thank you very much for being here.
And thanks for having me. And good morning. I'm here on behalf of the Right to Housing in Toronto. We're a coalition of organizations and individuals working to support the implementation of the human right to housing in Toronto. So we're in the midst of a decades-long affordable and adequate housing crisis. Housing conditions for low and moderate income households are worsening across the city, with more and more households lacking housing that meets human rights-based standards of affordability, security of tenure, accessibility, and habitability. And this crisis is partially the result of structural changes to Toronto's housing market that values housing as a commodity to be bought, sold, and left vacant by investors rather than as a human right. The financialization of housing has distorted the role of housing as a social good that provides security, dignity, and community, and it has undermined the realization of the right to housing here in Toronto and elsewhere. The right to housing in Toronto applauds the positive steps the city has taken on creating and maintaining affordable and adequate housing, on ending homelessness, and making the city's shelter system more accessible. However, these incremental steps need to be combined with structural measures that counter the financialization and commodification that's distorting the city's housing system. One symptom of this distortion can be seen in the growing number of homes citywide that are being deliberately held vacant by investors. And as such, we support the implementation of a vacant homes tax as a key step towards growing the supply of rental and affordable housing, as well as funding affordable and social housing initiatives, and ultimately moving towards the progressive realization of the right to housing in Toronto. And we know that these taxes work. We have a great example right here in Canada of how vacant homes tax increased the supply and affordability of rental units, but also helped fund housing-related initiatives. In January 2017, the City of Vancouver implemented an empty homes tax that currently levies a 1.25% tax on the assessed taxable value of vacant and underutilized properties. And my understanding is that this rate is going to go up to 3% next year. While the primary objective of this tax is to increase the supply of housing on the rental market, we also see that as a secondary benefit, this tax has raised millions of dollars that's been used to support affordable and social housing initiatives, and also support residential tenants, while also covering the one-time implementation and annual operating costs of the tax. We recommend the city follow Vancouver's lead and ensure that any revenue generated from a vacant home tax is used towards funding affordable housing initiatives and support for tenants. In short, Vancouver's empty homes tax has been successful in improving the affordable housing outlook across Vancouver, but also ensuring residents can recover housing as a social good rather than as a commodity. So while these taxes are policy tools designed primarily to increase the supply of rental housing, but also generate revenue that can help fund affordable housing, those are all very important policy outcomes, and we do support the adoption and implementation of a vacant homes tax. However, we urge the city to view this policy tool, these vacant homes tax, with an eye towards developing a broader housing policy that curbs housing financialization and moves the city closer to fulfilling its commitment to the progressive realization of the right to housing. Now is the time to examine how vacant home tax can be coordinated with the city's broader housing policy to curb financialization of housing and ensure safe, adequate, and affordable housing for all of Toronto's residents. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you this morning.
And thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Robart. Are there any questions of this deputy? Okay, well, thank you very much again for your thoughts on this, and we appreciate your being with us. We'll go back and try one more time with Fiza Khalid. Hello, Fiza Khalid.
You're going to come to the MS100 meeting?
Yeah, I just have to drop my mom real quick.
I just can't hear clearly. Is it the same thing on some other conversation? Okay, well, I think we'll just take that off then, because we can't keep doing this. Jeff Schoenberg from Progress Toronto would be next. Mr. Schoenberg on the line. Okay, Mr. Schoenberg, welcome and thank you. You have 5 minutes or up to 5 minutes, and then there might be some questions. Yeah. Now we're just after Christmas. Yeah, that's not Mr. Schoenberg. If you can hear me, we can't hear you very clearly, so we're just going to have a pause for a minute while we see if we can sort that out. Call in again. Mr. Schoenberg, if you could hear me, if you could call in again, we had a bad connection there, so we just couldn't hear you very clearly. And what we'll do is we'll go to the next one, and then we'll come. Pardon me? Fizza Khalid, are you there?
Hi, yes.
Okay. So we'll go to you then. We have a bit of, we were having some trouble getting hold of you when your turn came up, but here you are. So we welcome you. You have up to 5 minutes to make your deputation on the vacant home tax that's proposed. So I'll turn it over to you, and there may be some questions.
Good morning, councillors, staff, advocates, and residents of Toronto. Thank you so much for giving me time to speak. My name is Villa College, and I want to make it clear. When I speak, I'm speaking as one of the more fortunate ones in my peer groups when it comes to housing security. I have finished my university degree to continue my university education while working a full-time job for the last 3 years within reputable companies. I have saved and done everything by the book. Someone in my situation during your youth counselor would have a home and job security by their early 20s. However, I am turning 26 and I'm unable to afford to buy or even rent a home within Toronto, the city I immigrated to 20 years ago. With the rising cost of food, transportation, and increased precarious labor, everything in my future is uncertain. But what I do know for sure is I cannot afford to live in a city I have lived in for the last 20 years really wanting to. Especially when there are individuals with empty homes hoping to make an investment on depriving those who need affordable housing while creating huge ripple effects of inflation within the real estate market. I live in a multi-generational household, which has not been easy on my mental health. However, I am happy to have a roof over my head and a place where I can work. Many in my peer group are not so fortunate. I have friends who experience homelessness due to their sexual preference, and others living in abusive households, unable to escape their abusers. 21%, 1 out of 5 homeless youth in Toronto identify within the LGBT community. They end up on the streets due to family breakdowns and mental health problems. More than a third of Indigenous people experience precarious housing and homelessness in their lifetime. 27% of shelter users are women, and often with children. In many cases, these women are leaving their abusive partners and find it difficult to establish stability and affordable place to live. So my questions to you, councillors, are: how can one march in pride parades openly support the LGBT, Indigenous, women, and other marginalized communities while voting down a tax that will drastically increase the lives of such people? Why the cognitive dissonance? How can one celebrate Toronto as a city of diverse backgrounds while pushing aside the most vulnerable within a city? The lives of these people is deteriorating even more due to the pandemic. If we desire to create a more inclusive Toronto, providing public services for those who need help and not discarding marginalized communities, we must pass the vacant house tax by also de-incentivizing these investors who are removing the culture of Toronto. Not by a 1% tax or a 1.25% tax, which is laughable, but a 3% tax, and increase the tax according to the annual inflation in the real estate market. Even during the pandemic, there has been a reporting of 6% year-over-year increase home price change this year. It is averaged nearly a 10% annual increase over the last 5 years. A 1% tax will not de-incentivize these vultures who are removing Toronto's residents from the city. It is disillusioned to think so, and it is disgraceful to Toronto's residents to pass a tax so low. As city leaders, you must vote yes and dedicate all the revenue generated by the vacant house tax to affordable housing and public services. Thank you so much for letting me speak, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Ms. Khalid. Are there questions of this deputy? I see none, so I will thank you very much for your time and for participating today, and we will take your comments, of course, fully into account. So I thank you so much. Now, Mr. Schoenberg, did we get him back? So, Mr. Schoenberg, sorry about that. There's a little technical issue with the phone there. So, we've got you now on from Progress Toronto, and you have up to 5 minutes, and then we may have some questions for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope you can hear me now.
Yep, loud and clear.
I'm here from Progress Toronto. I'm in my late 30s. My partner and I had been living in Australia, and we left last Christmas. We went traveling for a few months and then landed in Toronto this past April. Just as a side note, I would advise people to not move across the world in the middle of a pandemic without jobs. It was a little bit stressful. That said, we were lucky. I have a PhD and currently work as an independent governance consultant. My partner is an Australian qualified lawyer and works in one of the big 4 consultancy firms. We were both able to get well-paying jobs that allow us to live comfortably in Toronto. We spent the first 6 months living in City Place and have now moved to Little Italy. We will be able to afford buying a home here in the next couple of years and probably an investment property within the next 5 years. Mayor, councillors, you know that we have a housing affordability crisis here in Toronto. People with far more direct experience with the impact of Toronto's high housing costs have told you about it today and will continue to tell about it and have told you about it before. You've also heard from experts in the field, and you know the successful examples from other places. Those stories and that information alone is enough to support a vacant home tax. I want to talk about sort of community and values and why I support a vacant home tax. I support a vacant home tax because the affordable rental market is critical to a vibrant city. It allows for new people to find their place, and it allows for people to move around the city. In the past dozen years, I have lived in Calgary, Melbourne, the Gold Coast, Denmark, Melbourne again, Canberra, and now Toronto. I have rented in every one of those places, and without rental opportunities, could not have done so. I want to live in a vibrant community, diverse in its residents. I want to live near artists, bartenders, new Canadians. I want all people to be able to live near their work if they choose. I want people to choose their community based on where they want to live rather than where they can afford. The housing affordability crisis in Toronto pushes people with lower incomes to the outskirts, creating a homogenous culture in the central areas. We need a vacant home tax to incentivize being a landlord. We need people willing and wanting to rent properties. When property owners are not interested in being landlords, there is a problem. A vacant home tax does not prevent people, potentially like myself, from owning investment properties. All it does is incentivize property owners to be landlords, to use residential property for what it is intended, to be a home. Living in City Place, all I could see were other high-rise condos. And every night I could see the vacant properties, the walls of unlit apartments, with the occasional light here and there. Then during the day, as I'm exploring my new neighborhood in my new city, I would see people without a place to live. The solution is right there. It's obvious. I support a vacant home tax because housing is too expensive here. Although I can afford it, I met my first Toronto friend when I was volunteering at a food bank in Parkdale. He was a fellow volunteer. He and his partner both have PhDs and moved to Toronto last year as she got an excellent postdoctoral opportunity. He couldn't find work in his field, so he's been working in retail. They are leaving Toronto next week, partly because of affordability. If 2 people with PhDs are struggling with affordability, what about all of those who don't have that advanced education? Ultimately, I support a vacant home tax because my values prioritize people over property. I support the needs of those who are unhoused over speculative property owning. I support a community that facilitates diversity rather than walls people out. And I support a city that allows all to live and thrive rather than struggle to survive. I'm asking each of you to vote yes on the vacant home tax and ask you to raise the tax to 3%. Should the tax pass, it is critical that this new revenue be added to the budget for affordable housing and services. Current expenditure in housing should not be displaced with this new tax money. Please commit to adding this tax money to existing spending on affordable houses and services. Please vote yes here at committee and vote yes at council. Vote for people, not property. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schoenberg. Are there any questions of the deputy? Okay, well, again, thank you very much for your patience and for your deputation. And we'll move on to Stuart Schussler. No, not here at the moment. All right, then how about Maria Garcia? I've seen Ms. Garcia's name on the screen. So Maria Garcia, are you there?
Hi, Mayor Tory. Yes.
Hey, okay, welcome. You've got up to 5 minutes, and then there may be some questions for you. So we welcome you, and you can go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. My name is Maria Garcia. As the mayor said, I'm here with Progress Toronto. Currently, I live at York Centre, so I'm happy to see that City Councillor James Pasternak is here. I just want to share a little bit about myself. I moved to Canada when I was 9 years old, as my parents thought I would have better opportunities here. My entire life, I have worked hard, I got good grades in school, and I got my first job at 15 and have worked ever since. In 2015, I finished my undergrad at York University with the help of OSAP, as my parents could not help me pay for my education. Since then, I have also completed 2 additional postgraduate certificates, one at York University and another one at Centennial College. Like many people my age and many people who have spoken before me today, I believe that an education and hard work would mean success and financial independence. Now, I am almost 30 years old, and yes, I have a full-time job that pays more than minimum wage. However, I have had to make peace with the idea that I'll never own a home in my city in Toronto because I simply will not be able to afford it. However, I am struggling now to make peace with the idea that I might not be able to afford rent in Toronto on my own. Rent alone would cost me half my paycheck, not considering what I would have to pay back on my student loans, as well as the cost of living here in general. Currently, I do live with my family here at York Centre, where we have to split rent 3 ways in order to be able to afford it. I sit here and I ask that you vote yes on a 5% vacant home tax and dedicate that revenue to affordable housing for people like me in the city and all those who need it, as well as for public services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Garcia. Are there questions? Councillor Pasternak has a question of the deputy.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much for deputing today on this important issue. 2 of my 4 kids have left Toronto. They moved out for a number of reasons, but affordability is one of them. What do you think this city would look like if a whole generation of young people don't see a future here and they start moving out? What would happen to our industries, to our neighborhoods, to our future?
Thank you, City Councillor Pasternak, for your question. I mean, I'm not an expert in urban planning, but I do think we are already seeing how the city is being affected by this. We're, like someone mentioned earlier, we're seeing Toronto's changing a great deal. People are being pushed out. We're seeing places that I grew up with that are being now demolished and turned into condos. And then I'm thinking, okay, but I can't afford these condos. You know, generations before me, generations like many of you here, you guys went to school, you worked hard, and you were able to afford your homes, you were able to afford your rents. And now I'm seeing that that's not the case for my generation and the generation after mine. So it is a concern, and I don't think Toronto would be the Toronto that we know and love if we are not able to live here and grow here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Pasternak, thank you. Are there other councillors wishing to question this deputy? If not, I'll thank you very much, Ms. Garcia, for your deputation and for answering questions, and we'll move on to the next. And the next person, if we have available, is Kelly Du.
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Good morning, and welcome to the Executive Committee. And you have up to 5 minutes to speak, and then we may have a question or two for you. So please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello. My name is. Hello. I'm a young emerging generation Z adult from Ward 14, Toronto Danforth. I recently graduated with my BSW this summer, and I am now looking for full-time work. But I am still having this nagging anxiety, reminding me that if I want to continue living in Toronto, I will never be able to move out of my parents' home, even when I get a full-time job. Though I am fortunate to have parents who are able and willing to support me by sharing their home with me, there are many other people who are not as fortunate. I have been seeing more and more people living outside and recent news articles of encampments being cleared away as we shamefully hide our housing crisis. My dreams of staying in Toronto, where I was born and raised, is looking bleaker. The constant nagging that is contributing to the anxiety I feel, it stems from the real issue of our city's housing crisis. My parents bought our bungalow in the late 1990s when it was just $300,000. That house has now tripled in price. We are lucky because we for sure would not be able to afford rent and living expenses in Toronto if my parents had not bought that house back then. How is it that houses sell upwards of $1 million and we still do not have a vacant home tax in place? People's lives should be prioritized over house investments. Members of the executive committee, if you care about the people who love living in this city, vote yes to implement a vacant home tax. All the revenue generated from the vacant home tax should go to affordable housing and public services. Vancouver's housing tax was recently raised to 3%. I want Toronto to be at least 5%. Since people are profiting from leaving their homes vacant and greatly contributing to our housing crisis. I will be watching and following the decision alongside Progress Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dew. Are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing no questions, we will move on, and thank you very much for your participation, and move on next to Catherine Sterlin-Choney. Are you there?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I think so. You have 5 minutes. You're most welcome here, and so please go ahead and speak up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Catherine Sterlin-Choney. I'm in connection with Progress Toronto. My family immigrated here in the 60s to the Toronto area and have contributed to the city by opening businesses, purchased homes, and sent 2 further generations of children to school, all within the now Humber River Black Creek area. This is an experience I will not be able to replicate for myself or generations after me. As an adult approaching 30, I can't afford to live in the community I grew up in where I currently work and serve as a program coordinator for a nonprofit supplying grocery boxes to our neighbors. We were forced to move out of our home in our city, near family, into Milton. And then after the rapid growth and inflation in Milton, I now live in Georgetown and have to commute to the city where traffic can be anywhere from 40 minutes to over an hour and a half. This also concerns me as it further adds to congestion and emissions that the city does not need. I heard for a very long time that the inability to purchase homes that my generation is facing was a reflection of us, an entire generation's collective poor budgeting. I internalized that feeling that I was somehow unaccomplished, even after doing everything I was told I was supposed to: go to school, get a credit card, and build credit, save your money, get a job with a reputable company, get a second job, and now I have 3 jobs. I did all of those things, and still living in a city I call home by either ownership or through renting is an impossibility. The problem was never us. The problem was our elected officials. I am one of many here today passionate about this issue, but there are countless that are not here and counting on action towards affordable housing. My asks are simple and similar to the other deputants. It's to say yes, dedicate the revenue generated towards affordable housing and public services, and learn from Vancouver and start at a very minimum of 3%. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sterlin-Choney. Is there a question for the deputant from anybody here? Okay, we won't have any questions, but we do thank you very much for being with us today, and we'll move to the next deputant, which is Philip Ilajevsky. Mr. Ilajevsky, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Okay. Well, we thank you for coming, and you have up to 5 minutes for your deputation, and then there may be a question or two.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Tory, and thank you to the councillors for this opportunity to speak. I'm living currently in Ward 3. That's Etobicoke Lakeshore. I just wanted to talk about this a little bit personally. I have a similar situation that I used to live in Milton, and I was very lucky to be able to find an apartment through friends in Etobicoke. But when I was living in Milton, I was basically traveling about 50 minutes to an hour and a half per day downtown, or to Etobicoke where I worked, and different areas. But I think what's important that hasn't been mentioned yet is the environmental impact that so many cars have, where people are being driven away. There's this real exodus from the city to go outside to farther places as far as Georgetown and Burlington, places like that, because we can't find homes here. We can't find affordable homes. We can't find homes, period, for something that's even remotely affordable. I have given up, as has most people that I know, and we're not talking about lower income people, but middle class people and upper middle class people, on ever buying a home anywhere in Toronto, or even a little bit outside. So that's completely off the table. And this tax is a wonderful idea. I'm really thank you all for taking this into account and thinking about passing this tax. I think it should be at 5%, because that's the only way you're going to get enough revenue to be able to pay for some affordable housing units and to be able to construct new housing units, to be able to make things more affordable and have a bigger impact. Because please don't even consider 1%. It's just crazy to think about that. My three sisters used to live in the Toronto area. We lived in Scarborough, and we lived in Etobicoke, but they all left. One of my sisters is near London, Ontario. My other sister is in Georgetown, and my other sister is in Vaughan. My brother also left, and he was in Brampton, and my mother also had to leave Toronto. So everybody had to leave from my family. I'm the only one here, and I want to stay, but the outlook doesn't look very good. I have lived in other places in the world, and I lived in Montreal, and in 2009, I paid $615 for a 2-bedroom apartment that was 10 minutes away from downtown Montreal. In 2017, I lived in Osaka. I lived in the center of Osaka, and I paid $800 Canadian, and that was not out of the realm of possibility there. The cost of a home, of a 1-bedroom apartment in Toronto, is over $2,000 a month. This is a significant amount, not of just a lower income working person who's paying minimum wage, but this is a significant amount of a middle class person's salary. It leaves very little. It doesn't leave anything for any kind of retirement savings. It doesn't leave anything for much other than the basic goods. So living paycheck to paycheck, you're making around $40,000 a year. It leaves very little for anything in terms of your future. When you talk about car payments, insurance, that's also very high in Toronto. So it's very unaffordable here. And a lot of people say Japan is expensive. Well, I lived in Japan, and the cost of living is much lower in Osaka in many ways than it is in Toronto. Our prices here for just about everything are much higher. So please pass this tax, and please set it at 5% to make it significant enough so that it can pay for some of these measures that we can take and try to make more affordable housing in Toronto. But also, I think, lastly, I want to tell the councillors, you have to think about who you are serving. Please consider your constituents, not people who are just broadly speculating and ballooning the prices here. Think about your constituents, people that actually live here. And please, don't force everybody to do this mass exit, because it is happening. And very few people I knew that lived in Toronto in the past still live here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ilajewski. Are there any questions of this deputant? Okay, seeing none, well, thank you so much for being here, and we will move on to the final deputant of the day, Rakev Kandia.
Hi there, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning. You have up to 5 minutes to make your deputation, and then we might have some questions. Thanks for being with us.
Great, thank you so much for having me. Hello, my name is Ravi. I am a current 23-year-old Markham resident who recently moved from Cedarbrae from Ward 24. So I'm here to talk support for the vacant home. 10 years, Ward 20 noticed a group of people in the corner of our block. Why are these people living on the road? It never occurred to me that they were homeless. Why? I genuinely thought the city was a place of humility. Everybody can fulfill dreams and opportunities, especially owning a house. So everybody includes my parents, who are both refugees who came to the city during the 90s from a war-torn Sri Lanka. Luckily, my parents do own a house through hard work and dedication, but it did cost our family $1.7 million, meaning a monthly mortgage of at least $5,000. So for obvious reasonings, can't really move out of my parents' basement. However, I cannot imagine a homeless person from Toronto afford a home because, unlike my own family, they do not have enough resources or any to assist them. It is an unfortunate thought. This is an unfortunate thought because I was once naive. Now I'm no longer. The city was not the once beloved city of humility that I once thought before, but it can be today. If members of the executive community care about the people who live in this city, please vote yes to implement a vacant home tax. All the revenue generated from the vacant home tax must go towards affordable housing and services, such as funding for education. And Vancouver's house was recently raised to 3%. I want Toronto to be at least 5%. I will be watching and following the decision alongside Progress Toronto. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Candia.
That's my story.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions of the deputant?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, thanks very much. There are no questions, so we thank you for being here with us this morning and for your patience. There was, just so you know, members, one more deputant, Alicia Sorensen, who has indicated she can't be with us in person today, and she'll send us something in writing, so that we'll look forward to receiving that. And I think that brings us to the end of the list of deputations. And so we would move next to questions of staff. And I have Deputy Mayor pardon me, Min Wong on the list of those. But before that, Councillor McKelvey, did you have any questions of staff on this? No. Okay. So we can then move right to members of the committee, and we'll start with the Deputy Mayor.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this question might be for our CFO, Heather Taylor. The first question is kind of an obvious one, but needs to be asked anyway in the context of this discussion. Do we have financial problems in our city?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, you're aware of the financial challenges that have evolved due to COVID, specifically due to COVID. And I would say that it has made 2020 a challenging year, yes.
2021 is going to be tough too, isn't it?
We are in unprecedented times at the moment, and we are in the process of developing a 2021 budget that reflects COVID challenges.
And a 1% vacant home tax estimate on how the revenue stream on that?
The estimate is based on a 1% vacancy in the city. Would generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $55 million.
$55 million. If we had $55 million extra, do you think we could use that to buy extra buses that we desperately need?
There are many uses of where the funds could go. The one caution that I will make is that if the policy is to reduce the number of vacant units,
yes,
the vacant units over time hopefully would be eliminated and the tax would go down. It would be concerning from my perspective if we became reliant on a tax stream for ongoing programs.
Sure, but we could we don't have enough money to buy those buses, do we, right now?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, as you know, when we're developing our capital plan, it's based on a priority perspective. So
Sure.
Depending on what the priorities are, that is where the funding gets attributed.
We identified at the last meeting of council that roads are a priority. We could use that money to fix our desperately falling apart roads, couldn't we?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, as you know, there are several competing priorities for the city. The roads are one of them, yes.
Our housing stock, TCH, hundreds of millions of dollars needed in repairs. We have our existing housing stock falling apart. We could use that money to fix some of the repairs in our wards where we have units that are, literally falling apart.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, you might recall last year, or actually earlier on in 2020, we did create a program where there is a steady funding stream for TCHC to address its state of good repair needs.
Wouldn't it be more valuable if we were getting more revenue in just not here, but in almost any other area, to send the money to general revenue so that we could apply it to priorities as they're needed?
So as I previously mentioned, if it was to go to general revenues and it funds ongoing activities, there is a concern that if this policy is effective, that ongoing revenue stream would diminish over time and there would be a reliance for ongoing operating activities. So that is a concern from my perspective, is that we become reliant on an unpredictable revenue stream.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm finished my questions. And if you could put me down to speak, I'd be grateful.
Yes, I've done that. Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Are there others wishing to ask questions of staff? I have Councillor Pasternak and I have Deputy Mayor Thompson so far. So we'll proceed with Councillor Pasternak then.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, I mean, one of the themes in the deputants that we just heard was the revenue from this tax will go into, I guess, building new affordable housing. But I really don't see that in the report before us. And is it a reluctance of staff to have dedicated revenue, or is it something we're going to discuss in the future?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, that's exactly the case. The recommendations of this report are for us to report back in 2021 with regards to the policy definitions in the policy, working with legal on the bylaws. So there is a required report back that would provide more information on the actual tax itself and then the potential use of those funds.
Okay, so that's still to be decided. I'm looking at a report from June 2017 asking staff to take a number of actions and report back to the September 2017 Executive Committee. Now, I'm not sure whether staff did the work on this. Do you recall whether we actually have an earlier report with recommendations on how to implement this tax?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, as you know, I started in 2018 and there was some history around a report back. This is the first report back since I've been with the city on, there was some work done with an external consultant. They're referred to in the report. We did work with KPMG. And so my understanding is this is the first report back. It is a bit delayed, and obviously you're aware that earlier in the year we were going to come, but because of COVID, this was deferred a little bit.
Yes, no, I am aware there's a pandemic going on. Now, when I see a delay in report, now we mentioned COVID, and that's fair enough, but when I see a delay of this nature, it's usually a reluctance of staff, a coolness of staff on the policy. Do you have a coolness, a reluctance to go forward with this policy? Are we, is this of concern to you, or you're okay as long as it's council direction?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, actually, Councillor, it's about ensuring that we have the appropriate work, that we've got the, we've done the appropriate due diligence, and that we can actually bring forward and have an informed conversation.
Okay, fair enough. So when it comes to rental supply, a lot of what's going on in the marketplace now are, individuals who have bought, I guess, investment properties, condos and buildings. Now, is our goal to get them to lower their rent? Because it seems to me that they can't rent it because they're charging too much or asking too much. Is it the objective of this to, because these condos are already on the market to rent, and we're trying to get people to rent them. So they're saying, well, I can't rent them because the market has, I can't charge less than what my mortgage is. Do you see that economic pull and tug and push and pull in the marketplace now, and that, a tax can't change that reality of someone who's taken on a very heavy mortgage and they can't charge less than a certain amount, or they'll lose money every month, and that they're charging too much above market and no one's going to rent it, so it stays empty?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, I think it's important to understand that when the work was done on this particular tax, we were looking at other jurisdictions, and all the data that we have is pre-COVID. The current market conditions have not been taken into consideration in the report. But going back to the policy objective of this tax, it would be to prevent units from sitting empty that are not principal residences, to ensure that available units could be in the marketplace available for people to rent.
Okay, I guess I have very little time left. Now, TCH has problems with vacancies every year. Would TCH be subject to this tax?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, I don't think TCHC would be candidates for this tax. My understanding is there's long wait lists for TCHC units. So I would be surprised as to hearing about units that sit vacant for more than an extended period of time, as well as this is about principal residences, and the units that TCHC have are properties of the city.
Right, okay. You'd be surprised at how long some of these units stay vacant, but that's another issue. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Pasternak. Just so you know who I have down here, I've got down Councillors Deputy Mayor Thompson, Councillor Crawford, Deputy Mayor Bilo to speak. Yes, so I have you there as well, Anna, so that's good. And I now see Councillor Nunziata, so I'll add that. And so that would bring us next then to Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to maybe it's Ms. Taylor or someone else. How many vacant units are there in the City of Toronto currently?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy Mayor, we actually don't have a tracking mechanism right now. We really just, as you can see in the report, we've really just done an estimate. So there is not a tracking mechanism. Right.
Okay. And we're not saying today that we're going to implement a vacant tax, unit tax at this moment. It's a process that you're going to work through with staff and I guess consultants to develop that. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy Mayor, we refer in the report that we need to work with the province. We need to work with legal. There is some work that needs to be done to identify components of the policy that would still need to be endorsed by council.
Right. And we know that it works in other jurisdictions, so we will look at best practices in order to implement our version of this vacant unit tax system, right?
That's correct.
Right. So if I owned a property and let's assume that I owned two properties and one was priced, and I think it was sort of the line that Councillor Pasternak was following. I'm not sure I heard an answer, and maybe it just I didn't hear it properly just because of the connection. So I want to just ask, I don't want to duplicate, but I just want to ask just because I didn't think I heard an answer. So if for example, I own a property and it's, I don't know, valued at $1 million, and assuming that 1% on that would be $10,000, and I wanted to rent that, and the market rent is more than the $10,000. How would we determine and let's assume that I'm not able to rent it for whatever reasons. What would be our process in order to ensure that either is there an exemption for that in this particular case where I wouldn't have to pay taxes because I can't rent it, or is there some sort of subsidy that we would implement as part of a process so that we could augment the rental component? So if someone, let's say, could afford, let's say, $8,000, we would, invest the additional $2,000. What would be that measure based on, even if the property was at $2.5 million, for example, because some of the properties are of those particular values, that they are vacant, they're not just unit, but they're vacant homes, for example, that I'm aware of. I'm just wondering, what are we to expect as part of the process that you're working through in order to come back to us? And how is it done in Vancouver? I don't know. So I'm just asking that question just for my edification.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So, Deputy Mayor, part of the report back is defining a principal residence, defining exemptions that would qualify. So that is not yet determined. However, just to use the example that you have, if you had two properties, as you mentioned, one of those properties, assuming, would be your principal residence, the other one would not be your principal residence.
Okay.
Those are the properties that this policy would be targeting.
Oh, that's helpful. And I must ask, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but one of the deputant termed those who are investing and or owning properties vultures. We don't take the position that they're actually vultures. We encourage people to invest in the city. Would you agree with that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Nope, we don't use the term vultures.
Right, thank you. I just wanted that clarification, just make sure that people understand we don't use that term at all.
No, it's nowhere in our report.
Thank you. Yes, I didn't see it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Councillor Crawford would be next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions really on dedicating this particular tax when it does come in. So you're not giving any recommendations on dedicating the tax. As much as it sounds great that affordable housing probably does make sense to be dedicated, you're not suggesting through this decision or report to make any of those decisions today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And with regard, and just on the dedication, again, I don't think, Heather, you were here a number of years ago, but we have the billboard tax that brings in $9 or $10 million a year. And back then, through the advocacy of the arts community, we put the billboard tax in. It's sort of a similar thing, a much smaller amount, of course. But staff at the time advocated not to dedicate this tax. And I was on council at that point. And can you explain, and I think you did this in one of your questions, about why it's important that we don't dedicate it, and it has to do a lot with the fluctuating aspect of a tax like this. So can you just reiterate again why you do not recommend dedicating the tax at this point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, the concern that I would flag is that when you become reliant on a certain revenue stream, and that revenue stream is unpredictable, and if the policy is successful, the revenue stream would in actual fact diminish over time. So my concern would be to create a program whereby you expect certain revenue streams to come in to fund that program, and that funding stream, it becomes unpredictable and unreliable.
So again, going back to, again, the example was set with this billboard tax, because we set the policy objective, which was primarily $25 per capita for the arts. And we have achieved that. We continue to achieve that, but we didn't have to dedicate the billboard tax to the policy objective to actually achieve what we wanted to achieve, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor Crawford. And that would bring us next then to Deputy Mayor Bailau for questions of staff.
Thank you. through you, Mr. Mayor, just want to make sure that I understand what we're trying to target. So we're really targeting homes that are sitting empty. So if somebody is buying, an investment property and they decided to rent it out, one or two, those are not the properties we're trying to target, right? If this is for properties that they're not fulfilling the objective of being somebody's home, either through rental or ownership, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I did answer Deputy Mayor Thompson's question in a very specific way because of the question he asked, whether or not if you had a second residence and you were not able to rent it, then that particular unit would in actual fact be captured under what we're proposing.
But if you're in the rental market, it's not. So we're not targeting rental properties out there, correct?
We are targeting properties
that are empty,
sitting vacant.
Okay. With regards to the percentage of the tax, you're not proposing a percentage yet, correct? You gave an example of a 1%, but you want to further look into what would be the appropriate percentage that would get to the goal of the policy. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's totally correct. We are just using the 1% as an indication. Again, we don't know the number of properties, so that's an estimate. We used 1% because in Vancouver, that's where they started. So we were just using it to create an idea of where the threshold would be.
Okay. And following on Councillor Crawford's questioning about the billboard tax. So we have the billboard tax that is dedicated. Is the city building fund also dedicated?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the City Building Fund is designated to specific types of projects, yes.
Okay. Is the hotel tax also designated?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the hotel tax is that one I don't think is designated. However, we do have commitments of the amount of hotel tax that we generate based on a policy. We, in actual fact, take a percentage of what we generate through the hotel tax and support the tourism industry.
Exactly.
So I think in theory, yes, that would be deemed a designation.
Okay. And is that because there's actually a desire of the public sometimes to understand where some of these taxes are going?
For you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's important that when people are paying tax, typically they have an increased appreciation for what the use of proceeds are.
Exactly. And do we have a housing plan approved that we put forward with 3 parts to be funded by the municipal, provincial, and federal government? Is our portion of that housing fund fully funded?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, at this time, the entire plan is not fully funded.
So could this be a source to fund some of the projects in our approved 10-year housing plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the use of proceeds from this proposed tax would be up to council to decide.
Okay. Thank you so much. Those are my questions.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Barlow. Then we would move on to questions of staff from Councillor Nunziata.
Thank you. I just want to ask a question about the Vancouver model, their revenue. Do you know where the revenue that they're generating is going to? I can't see that in the report.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff are on the call that actually did the research with Vancouver, so I'm going to direct that question to Andrew Flynn.
Because most of the deputants referred to the Vancouver model.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. The Vancouver revenue is going to affordable housing, and we're fortunate to have Abby Bond on the call as well, who has firsthand experience with the Vancouver model. If there's anything she needs to add, that would be appreciated. But it is at this point in time going to affordable housing.
So it's dedicated to affordable housing. When they started at 1%, and what are they now? in revenue?
They've just recently increased it to 3%.
3%. Okay. So as far as the recommendation, the recommendation to authorize a budget allocation of $5 million in 2021 and $6 million in 2022, is that to undertake the following steps to develop a vacant home tax program that's in the recommendation? Is that what the money is allocated for in the budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, so the unpredictable revenue that you spoke about, I can't remember who asked that question. It's similar to the land transfer tax, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
And there's no, when we did the a few years ago when we taxed the vehicle tax, the revenue from that, which did not go, was dedicated to roads. But I believe that revenue was not put into the budget. So it is possible to dedicate the revenue to a specific cause, to a specific area, right? If it's roads, parks, or housing.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, that would be a decision of council as to whether or not they wanted to direct and designate the proceeds to go to a specific program.
But it is possible to do that.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, it doesn't go into general revenue. Okay. Okay, so that's it for my questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. So that would then bring us to speakers, and I'm quite happy to compile a speakers list. I have the Deputy Mayor Min Wong on already. Who else is going to be wishing to speak to this? I think you are Deputy Mayor Bylaw because you have a motion, I think. So that would be two. That's fine. Well, we'll start off with those two and see what happens from there. So Deputy Mayor Min Wong, you're first.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say that I support consideration of a modest vacant home tax. However, such a policy must be done carefully and smartly.
Sorry, Councillor, Deputy Mayor, rather. Just to remind you, you have a motion, so you might want to just.
Oh, I have a motion.
Put that on the table.
Right, I do have a motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a motion that Council request the CFO to report back on exempting the principal residence of taxpayers from the application of the vacant home tax. Such report to include a review of the City of Vancouver's application of the empty home tax principal residence policy and its application to the Toronto vacant home tax, how a principal residence exemption can protect Toronto snowbirds, and any possible impact of the Toronto vacant home tax policy on the application of federal capital gains tax on the sale of a principal residence. So I say that specifically because I don't believe that this council wants to create a bylaw that will have the unintended consequence of inadvertently taxing a homeowner's principal residence. And this is a particular concern to snowbirds who travel south in the winter. I'm sure we can all agree that we should not be taxing seniors who are trying to enjoy their golden years, nor should it impact the capital gains they would otherwise have to pay on what is probably their most important asset in their retirement. So I would say that, as I said before, that I support a modest home tax, but we have to have a degree of sensitivity to those who will be asked to pay for it. And we haven't talked enough about that today. As one of my constituents wrote to me, said, all new taxes deserve serious scrutiny. As once enacted, they are rarely rescinded. It comes as no surprise to me that those who don't have to pay the tax are the first to recommend that the taxes should be increased. This is all too typical at City Hall. As a council, we have to take into consideration the important role that the construction industry plays in creating jobs and in the health of the Toronto economy. As I have said before, and I will repeat again, we face serious challenges in our economy. The solution lies in growing the economy and creating new jobs and new wealth. It does not happen by creating new and large taxes. I won't be supporting a tax greater than 1%. I will not be supporting a tax that does not go to, and direct the funds to be applied to general revenues. To direct the funds is to do a disservice to transit, roads, Toronto community housing, and all the other priorities we have in the city. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Now, are there any questions of the mover? Because I have one if no one else does. The question I'd like to ask is just, would you consider amending the motion simply to, just because it's not entirely clear here, but I assume you'd be satisfied with the report that you asked for here being a part of the overall report expected in Q2 21 that's referred to in the recommendations. I just want to make sure that, because it will all then come at once.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. This principal residence thing is a big thing, and I don't think any of us intended to, so that people's principal residents end up being taxed.
So then when
it's my report, I'm fine with that.
When it's my turn, we'll either treat it as a friendly amendment or otherwise we'll just amend it to make it clear that it's to be
That's
in
fine.
the same report.
But, Mr. Mayor, I passed this by the CFO, and the substance of it, she seemed to be satisfied with.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Those are my questions of the mover. Are there others wishing to ask any questions of the Deputy Mayor? Okay, then that would bring us next on the speaker's list to Deputy Mayor Bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think that the success of this policy and this tax is eventually not collecting much funds from it. I think the goal here is really to have units that are not in the rental market, that are not being occupied, to be brought back into the rental market. You know, I think houses are being built to eventually be somebody's home. Either through purchasing, either through rental, either through families staying over, but to be occupied. I think that given the housing crisis that we have and the pressures that all governments are facing because of housing affordability, we have to motivate everybody to have their properties, being their investment properties or not, to be somebody's home. And I think this is the main goal of this policy, is to ensure that the property is in the market. So I'm very supportive of this policy. And one thing that I would like to emphasize that our CFO said is when the revenues come by the collection of this tax, and I agree with the Deputy Mayor that it has to be done carefully. Nobody wants to tax principal residents, and we all understand people have constructions, people have things that happen in their properties, and all those things need to be taken in consideration as we develop the bylaw. But with regards to the funds, I think two things are important. One is that we're not reliant on this fund. I think the CFO alerted us for that, and I think it is important that we take that in consideration. We don't want this to be another pressure like we have with the land transfer tax on our operating budget. I think we need to be conscious of that. But I do believe that this should be directed to affordable housing. Just because it is a housing policy more than a tax, I think that all of us that are very supportive of this see it as a housing policy tool more than a tax. And we keep saying that, you know, the success is not to have the funds coming in, but as the funds are coming in, there's plenty in our 10-year housing plan that we know in capital projects that we know those funds could be allocated. And this council has done it in many other ways. Like I said, city building fund, a billboard tax, hotel tax. We have these taxes allocated to certain areas, certain industries. And I think Torontonians would understand us saying, yes, we are introducing this new tax. The objective is to actually bring these on the market, and not the main objective is not to collect these funds, but as we are collecting, because people will have the choice to keep their properties empty, if that is the case, having the property empty creates pressures in the housing sector. So I think it is only fair that if the pressures are being created by that person having that unit open, that those funds are allocated to create solutions in that sector. And that's why I'm hoping that staff, as they're developing this policy, take this in consideration. It is really to respond to the pressure that property owner is creating by having that unit empty, that I believe that those funds need to be allocated to solve that issue. So with that, those are my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Barlow. Now, I'm just looking at there we see Deputy Mayor Thompson ready to speak, and so over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to lend my support to the report that's before us from our staff, which is, looking at analyzing and potentially designing and implement a system for vacant home taxes in Toronto. I mean, there is not something else that we can call it. It is a tax, but of course, it's not like the types of taxes that we traditionally impose where people are offended by. I think that it's the type of situation as it relates to, if you have a property and it's vacant and it's not being utilized, this is the only measure that we as a municipality would have, which is to levy a measure, which is the tax. But really, I think it's a tool as it relates to the comments that Deputy Mayor Barlow has just been making, that can help us with respect to a real challenge that we're actually facing in the city. Many of the policies that we actually have in place right now are, and you're looking at terms of, affordable housing. The question is, whether or not we're looking at a really deep measures to help us with respect to affordable housing, or not we're looking at 15-year ranges, or we're looking at 40 to 49 or into perpetuity and so on, and creating that ability to afford. Those are some of the challenges that we're working on now, and I know that there are some new proposals that are coming forward, which are quite interesting in as much as they may not give us the full large numbers as the short-term measures may. Long-term is of great benefits because they obviously last longer. I will tell you, Mr. Mayor, it was a few years ago that I was in the downtown area on King Street specifically, and I was there, and it was with a person that we all know, and his name is Al Carbone, and Al is at least was the proprietor of the Kit Kat. And, we're talking about King Street and the King Street pilot with respect to the streetcar and so on. And Al was, explaining to me his lack of support for the King Street streetcar. And he said to me, look at all these condos that you guys are building here and are giving approval to. And he pointed out to one building, and it was late in the evening. And he says, look at the building. And I looked at the building. I didn't really see anything that distinctive about the building other than there were some elements. There were more dark areas as opposed to lit areas. And he said to me, those dark areas there are the areas where no one lives in those particular units. And we need to make sure that we should be renting those units and so on. And it was interesting in terms of his observation. And I kept, an eye on other areas in the city and looking around. And when I would either drive or walk by to kind of see and understand what was actually happening. And sure enough, as I talked to more and more people who lived in some of these buildings downtown, they'd say to me, on my floor, there are 4 or 5 units that are actually vacant. Nobody lives in them. And yet, you guys in the city of Toronto are not doing anything to address these things. And I think people are welcoming this idea of a vacant, unit tax. And at the same time, as has been stated, look, you can be part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And if you are part of the problem, we have measures that are going to respond to that in order to engage to ensure that we can create opportunities for, more rental stock on the market. I haven't determined exactly what I will support going forward, whether or not it will go directly to a specific dedicated fund or whether or not it will go into general revenues and so on. I'm really looking forward to the report that Ms. Taylor and her team will bring forward. But I do think that this is the appropriate direction to go. It's been tried in other areas and so on. Whether or not it's 1%, 3%, or 5% or more, we will see what the analysis is that's being brought forward by staff. But I do want to thank the staff for a very thorough report and a report that certainly we can all rally around, of course, once it comes back. And I just want to remind everyone that we're not initiating it today. It is something that's going to come after we've done the full analysis and so on. So thanks very much for the report from the staff. And again, also, Mayor, thank you for your leadership on this. And Deputy Mayor Barlow as well. Thank you.
I see Councillor Pasternak speak. Thanks, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Councillor Pasternak is next.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will be brief. During the deputations, we heard from people who are on the verge of leaving the city because it's no longer affordable. And as I mentioned in my questions, I have two kids who've already left the city because of primarily affordability, other reasons as well. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what kind of city are we going to have if our next generation, young people, continue to leave? How will it affect many of our industries? Whether it be retail or hospitality, food and beverage, some of our sports industry. How will it affect our universities? So the repercussions of losing a whole generation of people who don't want to or can't afford to live here anymore is quite a serious thought, and it should have a response. But I think it's important to understand what's before us today. We are not adopting a vacant home tax today. We are directing staff to put a framework, a legal framework together and the policy design, and then come back to us for further comments on whether we accept, amend, or reject what's brought before us. The other thing we're not doing today is we're not deciding on how the revenues from this tax will be used. Now, that being said, when it comes to taxation or fundraising, when you have a specific goal where the funds are going on, you're more likely to get buy-in and support for your initiative. In other words, if the revenue from this goes just into, general revenue or big black hole and nobody really knows where it is, it's a big hodgepodge and people don't understand what it's all about, there's less likely to be support for it. But if it's targeted towards affordable housing initiatives, seniors affordable housing, seniors villages, those types of things, then you get a lot more support. I think what we're going to find is in the marketplace is you're going to find a lot of people, small time investors who have bought a couple of units who can't rent them out, and they are actually paying mortgage costs and other utility costs related to it, maybe condo fees, and they cannot rent it out. They'll lose money on it if they rent it out below a certain amount. And then on top of that, the city comes around after they're already suffering financial loss because they have a minimum rent, and maybe the rent is too high. Maybe they've overextended themselves. And the city comes along and taxes, let's say a retired couple or seniors or young investors who have lost on their investment and have tried everything possible to rent it out without losing money, and the city comes along and throws a tax on top of that. I can't see that going over very well. But that being said, I know there's a lot of complexities to this issue. We've got to have an honest discussion, and we've got to make sure that it's implemented fairly if we do adopt it, and that we understand where the revenue is going. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pasternak. Let me just have a look now at there we have Councillor Nunziata wanting to speak, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just speak briefly. So as it was mentioned, what we have before us is asking staff to undertake the following steps to come back to us at the end of 2021 on a vacant tax, vacant home tax in Toronto, which I fully support, and I believe all of us support that. And I agree with the comments by Councillor Bailao as far as affordable housing. I think that will come back to us when staff report back to us on how we're going to dedicate the additional revenue to. But it's working as it was said, it's working in Vancouver, and and I agree with Councillor Pasternak. I think that if the residents realized that we were adding this additional tax on and where the revenue was dedicated to, I think they'll be more acceptable than just putting it into revenue. I think we talked about revenue tools. We have talked about that for a while now. And I think, this is an opportunity for us to to get those revenue tools and get additional revenue, we have to also look at other revenue tools as well in the future, because as it was mentioned in 2021, we do have a very challenging budget that we have to meet. So I will be supporting the recommendation, and hopefully by the end of 2021 with a recommendation from staff, and then at that point council will make the decision on where the revenue will be dedicated to. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Nunziata. Let me just get back to the screen on it with our committee members. Anybody else wishing to speak on this? Okay, well, I'm just going to say a word or two, if I might. Let me just stop the clock and reset it here, just so I can be fair to everybody. So, first of all, I want to say thank you to the staff for their work in putting this together. This has been, it's one of those things, like everything else, you know, they say good food takes time, and I'm not sure there'd be some who would not equate this to good food, but I think a sound public policy measure takes time to research and to study, and that work is not yet done. In some respects, some of the important decisions are just beginning, as some of colleagues have noted. But I want to thank the staff for the work done to date, and I think what they brought forward here is, in principle, a very sound public policy recommendation, and we're helped by the fact that it has been tried, including in a major Canadian city. So I think we can see, you know, what's worked, what has changed, and so on. And I guess you have to start, though, from the premise that you accept the fact that, well, yes, indeed, houses are for investment, and they're a good investment. And people who are in the fortunate position of being able to invest in more than one beyond their own, that's great for them. But at the same time, houses are for people, first and foremost. Houses are a place to live. And so in this case, we're not saying that somebody has to live there. We're simply saying there's a choice you have. And the choice is that you can choose to own a house or a condo or any other kind of housing, and you can keep it empty and pay a tax, or you can either rent it out or sell it and not pay the tax. And so there's a choice there that people can make. And indeed, if you look at Vancouver, people have made a choice in have taken both choices. Some have chosen to pay the tax and keep the property empty for reasons known to them. Others have chosen to put the units back in to the market. And I think it is worth noting in my voicing my strong support for this initiative and to making sure it continues to get pushed forward, is that in Vancouver the experience has been a 25% reduction in vacancies. And that means that 25% of thousands of homes, 25% of the total of thousands of homes, which means thousands of homes have been returned to the housing market for availability to people who want to rent them, probably, or who in some cases ended up buying them. And I associate myself with the comments that were alluded to by Deputy Mayor Bailo, which is that I wouldn't be unhappy when it comes to talking about the money involved here if this tax ended up eventually producing no revenue, because you had 100% of the houses that were occupied in some way by somebody living in those houses. And so I think that in the end, this is not as much about the money as it is about using what I have described as a useful tool. I think the report uses that expression, in fact, to try to increase the supply of housing. A couple of more points that I want to make, which is that I myself want to wait and see what the staff recommend after their additional research and so on with respect to how these funds are used, not because I wouldn't prefer strongly, in fact, to see the money go to enhance our efforts with respect to affordable housing. But you have to think it through carefully, and if you got to the desired state where 100% of units were occupied and there were no vacant houses, and you'd then come to rely on that money for affordable housing as part of the budget, then you'd be sorry about that in a certain way. You'd be happy that all the houses were occupied and apartments and condos, but you would be unhappy that the revenue stream got down to zero, and you don't want to have a declining revenue stream for that kind of thing. And of course, the converse of that could be that there'd be huge pressure if that number started to drop because the tax was being successful in achieving its purpose, which is to put people into those homes. There'd be huge pressure to raise the tax up and up and up to keep the revenue stream alive, which also might be something that could be, in that case, bad public policy. And I don't say that in any judgment about the deputants who came today to suggest it should be higher. The staff will consider that as well, and we've heard people on this committee say they wouldn't vote for a tax higher than 1%. I'll wait and see what they recommend in light of Vancouver, in light of everything else, about what will be an effective policy policy tool to achieve the desired outcome here, which is to make sure that homes are for people to live in, first and foremost, and we do give a choice to pay the tax or not, but that homes are for people to live in. The final thing that I want to say is to acknowledge this cannot be seen, is not seen by me, is certainly not seen by Deputy Mayor Bilo, I know, as a substitute for our housing policy and our other housing goals. We remain committed to doing what we have to do and doing even more than what we've set out to do on affordable housing and on supportive housing. But I guess what this is something that would be in addition to our efforts with respect to affordable housing, and something that represents an, in the meantime, a kind of measure that can be taken to increase the supply while we intensify our efforts to build and to make available more supportive and more affordable housing. So I know members sound like they're going to support this measure. I hope that that will be the case at City Council so staff can get on with their work and bring this forward. And I will certainly, for one, be wanting to push this forward to completion and to implementation in 2022, because I think it's a very sound public policy measure to achieve one of our most important objectives. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so are there any other speakers? I think we've heard from pretty much everybody that seems to want to speak. In that case, we would go first then to the motion from Deputy Mayor Min and Wong, which we'll just put up on the screen. There it is. And it's been changed, as you can see here, to reflect the fact this report too will come back in the second quarter of 2021 with the other one that's referred to in the principal recommendations from staff. So if there are no further comments, I'll call the question on the motion number 1. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Then we would go to item as amended and ask for all those in favor. Opposed? Carried unanimously. So I thank you for that. Now, we have, it's 12 o'clock, so we have half an hour if we go to the 12:30. We'll see how we do here. I think we have one, if the deputant is here, we have one deputant on item 19.10, which is the solid waste budget. If I can just find my deputants list here somewhere, then there we are. We have one deputant on that, and I'm just going to see if that person happens to be available, because we could then, I think, probably deal with that item. Emily Alfred? Pardon me? Oh, is it? Okay, can you unmute her? Oh, Emily Alfred, are you there? Emily Alfred. Okay, well, we won't be able to do that just now because maybe she went off to do something else. We had, I don't know, Councillor Thompson, 19.4. Whether we have deputants you see on 19.5, so I was just going to leave that for a minute to see if we could eliminate a couple of these others more quickly. 19.4, Councillor Thompson,
sure.
Deputy Mayor, you held that. Was that for some questions or for some comments? This is the key side.
Yeah, just quick questions of staff, but I'm obviously...
You have some questions or on a motion on that, Deputy Mayor? Okay, well, I think nonetheless... we'll just try one more time.
I was going to say, I'm in your hands, Mr. Mayor, how you'd like to proceed.
No, I think unless I can just hear Emily Alfred, I'll ask her one more time if she's there. I think we unmuted her. Emily Alfred, she may have put us on hold.
Hello?
Oh, is that Emily Alfred?
Hi. Yes,
hey.
Sorry about that.
No, hey, no problem. We're glad to have you here. You're most welcome. Now, you're here on the rate-supported budget for solid waste management. And
yes, I am.
As you know, the way this works, we're just going to deal with that item now because you're our sole deputant on that, but we're delighted to hear from you, and you would have up to 5 minutes to make your comments, and then there might be some questions for you. So are you ready to go?
I am. Thank you very much.
All right, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so as you know, my name is Emily Alfred. I'm the waste campaigner at the Toronto Environmental Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization that has been advocating for zero waste for more than 30 years. Moving towards zero waste not only prevents the pollution and harm of disposal, but it also conserves resources and energy, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and it's essential to create a local, resilient, circular economy. I spoke to the Budget Committee a few weeks ago, but I'm here today with additional comments and to again urge this committee not to cut the waste education budget, but to enhance it and increase it. The proposed 2021 budget includes eliminating printed waste guides, also known as waste calendars, that are mailed out to every household, and instead direct residents to get their information online or pick up materials at events and community centres. While this may seem like a quick solution that saves money and eliminates paper use, we believe that cutting this direct mail educational tool will actually result in higher waste costs and more contamination of all waste streams in the long term. Currently, the Waste Calendar Guide is the foundation of the city's waste education. It's a printed guide that is delivered to every single house and every multi-residential unit in the city. It includes basic recycling organics information, as well as details about other city waste services. It serves as a reference guide that complements other promotional efforts. For example, someone might see a transit ad or get a flyer in a waste bill, but they won't likely remember the details. A printed calendar guide at home stays up all year and can be something people go back to when they have a question. It displays information in multiple languages every month. And importantly, it doesn't require residents to seek out the information on their own. We strongly support the expansion of online and web-based communications as critical to expanding and reaching more people in Toronto. The staff briefing note points out that the city website and the TO Waste app are reaching a growing number of Torontonians. The city should be encouraging more people to download the Waste app and to visit the city website. The city should expand online communication tools, for example, making posters and guides in different languages available for download. And the city can offer online events, chats, and opportunities for residents to learn more. However, we believe that completely eliminating direct mailings of a printed guide will leave out a significant portion of the population. Some estimates say that 11% of Toronto households don't have internet access at home. This is largely low-income households. T's research with U of T of multi-residential households shows that seniors are half as likely as other groups to go online for information. Seniors make up 50% of Toronto's population. And research out of York University shows that marginalized groups, including seniors and new immigrants, prefer and rely on printed materials over online tools. Aside from an equity issue to reaching all Toronto residents, no matter their age or income, direct mail of printed guides is important from a social marketing perspective. One study done in Ontario showed that people spend less than 5 seconds looking at signs on public waste bins to understand how to sort. People are busy, and most people are not inclined to take extra steps to download an app or go to a website to learn things. The city survey described in the briefing note also shows that residents really do rely on printed waste calendars. But it's important to know that while the city survey shows that people are looking at more online sources, the survey done by the city was actually done online. So it's predisposed to reaching people who are comfortable communicating in English and comfortable online and with computers. T did research with University of Toronto at multi-residential buildings. We talked to a dozen buildings across the city. We had more than 1,000 responses. And our survey was done in person and on paper and online. So we had multiple options. We found seniors were most likely to do the survey on paper, and they were very much reported that they preferred learning on paper and that they preferred seeing these guides in person. So I can give you some more statistics, but I think that's really basics. I've shared some information at the previous budget committee meeting. I know that Dr. Calvin Lacken from York University has also submitted a letter to the executive committee just this morning explaining some of his research findings and his concerns about eliminating printed materials. I encourage this committee to look at expanding the communications and education budget, not reducing it. When I looked at, I find the city budget information very confusing to follow, but it looks to me that based on the approved budget for 2020 of over $5 million, this reduction would be a 30% cut to education and communications in waste. I think Toronto has an excellent best-in-class waste system. It has great infrastructure, great services, but it needs education and communications with residents every day to make sure that they do their part to participate. So I encourage you to maintain printed mail-out guides for all residents in the city. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your deputation, Ms. Alfred. Are there any questions of the deputant?
Yes.
Is that you saying that to Deputy Mayor? Yeah. Okay. So you go ahead then.
Yes. What's the cost of the calendar?
I believe, I'm not 100% sure. I believe that Matt Kelleher said at one of the last meetings it was around $800,000. I guess he could confirm that, but it's about 20. I think the city briefing note said it was around 27% of the education budget. It's a pretty big part of it.
Okay, I'll ask staff to get a confirmation of that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
And I may speak on the item.
Oh, yeah, okay. Then we have any other questions of the deputant? Okay, Ms. Alfred, thanks again for your being here. We appreciate that very much. Then we would move 2 questions of staff, starting with, we have a couple of people for visiting from outside the committee. Councillor McKelvey, I think you're here on the transit, so no questions on this item. Okay, then we go to committee members, and I think I see Councillor Crawford with a question.
Mr. Mayor. I'll probably ask the same question that Deputy Mayor is going to be asking. So that's to staff, Matt Kelleher. Can you just briefly walk us through, number one, the rationale for reducing or getting rid of the direct mailing calendar? And what alternatives, and the cost, of course, what that would be, but what are the alternatives that we did discuss, you did discuss at the Budget Committee, on trying to ensure that we still maintain our ability to communicate with all residents across the city on solid waste initiatives and savings?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, am I coming through?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So the rationale behind the reductions, the printed out calendar is around $900,000, so close to $1 million to develop, and it's sent out once a year. What we're looking at doing is in line with the overall corporate strategic plan of digitizing our services and pushing to digital. And with that, we're looking at waste reduction as well. And the other part is we're looking at ways we can get the same information out at more frequency. So part of the work that we've been doing with Revenue Services is looking at our direct mail out with our bills that go out 4 times a year, and including inserts on the calendar in those bills, as well as up-to-date information on tools to recycle and directing residents to the online platforms. We've invested quite a bit of money in terms of our Toronto Waste app, which has all of the information of what and where products should go when your collection day is. And it's even structured in a way where if you put your address in, that it will give you reminders before your garbage day or recycling day or organics day. So all the information is in that system to be able to be pushed out on demand. And we're also investing a lot in terms of our community reduce and reuse programs, upwards of $2 million a year to educate and communicate our program with residents throughout the city.
Thank you. So you did mention you're looking at putting information in the bills that get mailed to people. The deputy brought up a good question and comment with regard to people who don't have internet, don't have the ability for that, and they really rely on these calendars to sort of talk about waste reduction. How do we manage that sort of conundrum and challenge?
So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we have a number of resources available, whether it's 311 or with the direct bills that come to residents. We will have that information, a good deal of it in those in the envelopes. And really what we're looking at is synergies and efficiencies with getting that information out. So when we look at the direct mail cost and the development cost of a calendar, we're upwards of around $1 million. But when we can combine that information in the bill that goes out to residents 4 times a year, we can do that for around $100,000 to approximately $200,000. So we're looking at ways that we can get the same information out, just a little bit more efficient. The other piece too on the languages concern that was brought up, with it being online, we'll be able to actively promote multiple languages, more than we do now. I think we have upwards of 15 languages that our material goes out in. And with all the information being in a new digital format with more robustness around that, we'll be able to meet our outcomes of more and better waste diversion and access to our information 24/7.
Thank you. And just a quick question with regard, you like all divisions and agencies across the city have had huge financial challenges with your budgets. And you were able to bring in a 1.5% budget, which is lower than I think the combined 2.7 you were expecting. And you'd be able to do that through a certain amounts of efficiencies. You just talk about some of the work that you did to ensure that you sort of bring in an affordable budget increase for residents.
Absolutely. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council, we've looked through a number of our contracts and renegotiated contracts to reduce our overall costs. We've looked at our staffing levels, our projected needs in terms of delivering our service and meeting our overall outcomes. And that's where we're really focusing on, is our outcomes based, not necessarily all the resources that needs to go in. It's how do we make sure that we meet our outcomes and deliver those outcomes with the funding that's approved by council. We've looked at our capital budget and smoothed that out and looked at how we can better facilitate the planning of our capital budgets in terms of a smooth annual expenditure versus some ups and downs. And we looked at our debt financing structure, our funding from reserves to ensure that we have long-term stability within our overall program. So there's a lot of work done by the team to be able to bring in a 1.5%. The other piece that we looked at too, and back to the deputant's comments on communications budget in whole. So I think what we need to ensure that we look at is the difference between what communications is and what education is. And our outcome is really to educate residents, not to necessarily communicate to them. And sometimes they're melded together. And we've brought on, or we've developed a new stakeholder and outreach group within solid waste that will do a lot of that outreach and engagement versus some printed material. But when we look at our experience during COVID, we've spent only around $600,000 to $700,000 of our communications budget, and we're looking to maybe spend around $1 million to $1.5 million next year with our budget. And some of that is just due to the demands of what information can go out from the city in terms of our ability to push that out, and the focus of our communications team being rightfully so dedicated to COVID. So just because our communication budget has been reduced in 2021, it doesn't set the precedence that every single year after that it will be the same or lower. We're looking to spend what we can spend and not rate for things that we anticipate not being able to spend on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Head Deputy Mayor Menon Wong to ask questions of staff.
I was going to ask how much it costs, but that question's already been answered. You know what, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to speak on this item, please.
Okay, thank you. We have then Councillor Nunziata wishing to ask questions of staff, and Deputy Mayor Barlow to come.
Just a question. At budget, we also talked, Matt, we also talked about some of the multi-residential units that you'll be working with management of these buildings on putting up notices in the buildings, correct?
Oh, that's correct, Councillor.
Now, just a question on the calendars. So now we mail out calendars every year. Does that change the calendars as far as the pictures and whatever information you have on that? Does that change every year, or is it the same as just the year you just send one out every year?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, there's some content changes and some different pictures and different items that they may move depending on the circumstance from one area to the other. There's generally some minor schedule changes just based on route optimization, but for the most part, they do stay the same, the collection calendars.
So some people will be using the same calendar year by year, correct?
Some people can. I'd say the majority of the items that are in garbage, organics, and the blue bin have not changed. And for most people, the day that they have their materials collected does not change either. But the other piece too is we'll have this all online, so it can be printed. It will also be put into the bill mailouts as well. So a lot of that information will be pushed out more frequently than once a year at a much more efficient cost.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Nunziata. I had Deputy Mayor Barlow with some questions, I believe.
Yeah, just questions around logistics. So usually people get these calendars just before the end of the year. So will the app and the information on the bill be delivered before the end of the year as well?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, the calendars are actually being put out right now for the 2020 budget. And so what will happen is around this time next year, there will be a communications piece on, well, throughout the year on how to transition to the app and get more relevant 24/7 a day information, as well as there will be the printouts throughout the year to allow us to have information all year.
So it actually gives you this full year to do that transition to the digital and to educate and to have all that information in the bills, and then only towards the end of next year they won't get the calendars.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Barlow. Are there other members of council or committee wanting to ask any questions of staff on this? Okay. We then can move to speakers, and I had heard Deputy Mayor Menon Wong indicating first that he wished to speak, so over to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I think my record is 95% of the time I support the budget as presented by staff. I think they may have got it wrong on this one. And I'm considering it, council. I have to have further discussions. But I think we may be doing the wrong thing on this one. I didn't, and my record in supporting the budget is equal with my disagreement with Emily on most issues at T, but I think she's got it right. She may have it right. Our family, and I think most families across the city, we use that calendar almost every week to see what's going out. It's important. I can also tell you seniors need that calendar, and they're not going online. I never go online to look, and I don't think a lot of people go online. They use that calendar. Mr. Mayor, I don't know about you, but and I think every employee in the city gets our paycheck mailed to us every 2 weeks. Why don't you stop doing that and email it to us and take that money and spend it on a calendar that's one of the few things that our residents get from us, that they use maybe every week to find out what they're supposed to put out, what's supposed to go in the green bin when they find something that they don't usually throw out every single day, where they can go and get information on different things. It's a small thing, but it's an important thing. So I think that this choice to cut $800,000 is find something else, but not something that's, I think really useful to the residents. So I don't have any motion. I do have a concern, and I will consider taking it to moving a motion to council. I think this might be the wrong approach if we want to promote and continue recycling methods, and also for our residents, especially our older residents, who really rely on that calendar. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. And I have then Councillors Pasternak and Crawford to speak on the list. So we'll keep going there. Okay, over to you, Councillor Pasternak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, I'll be very brief because I think Deputy Mayor Minawong, I think to summarize what I was going to talk about. I have the calendar in front of us now, and I'm not looking at it as a cost center. I'm looking at this as an investment. I mean, if people, even if a fraction of our residents read this and get knowledge from it, or get advice from it and act on just even a fraction of the suggestions here, it could potentially save the city millions of dollars from mistakes made in what people put in the green bin, whether it's recycling or the garbage. And also, it provides important advice on how to, there's some fire safety stuff here. People don't know about our toxic taxi, which provides advice here. It talks about hazardous waste, talks about food waste. And that's such an important conversation when it comes to food scarcity. And I think, there's this big poster here right in the middle. It tells you exactly, or generally speaking, what should be going on in each container. And the mistakes made by the common household owner, like me, cost the city a lot of money. The wrong things in green bins can jam up the equipment. The wrong things in the garbage bin fill up our landfill. We're running out of landfill. A new provincial statute is making it even harder to find alternatives when ours is used up in 20 years. Very important about camping fuel canisters. So I think, I don't have a motion, but I would agree this may be something to take a second look at, because I've got to tell you, in our household, I rely on it. Because sometimes I'm not sure what week it is to take the stuff out, and it's important, and provides good advice throughout the year that many people rely on. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm not trying to be critical of staff. I think Matt's done an amazing job, in our solid waste area. He reports to infrastructure and environment, and he's been doing a great job. Just a sober second look at this decision, I think, is prudent. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pasternak. I next had Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to remind our colleagues, my colleagues, on the bigger picture of the challenges that we've been facing over the last year on our financial, difficulties. And the numbers are big. You've seen the numbers. $1 billion, $1.5 billion, $2 billion that of revenue loss, and the challenges that we've been facing. The CFO and the city manager sent out to all staff all across the divisions, and you'll be seeing a lot of this as we come into the budget process in 2021. Solid waste, parking, and water are just one of the examples. And it's an example of the incredible amount of work that our staff all across the system have been trying to do. Number one, to mitigate some of these cost challenges, to recognize that there's still an affordability challenge in the city. And when we're looking at tax rates, when we're looking at the rates for solid waste or water, they worked really hard to figure out how we can keep it affordable. So with water and with solid waste, they brought what would have been a 3% and a 2.7% increase down to 1.5% because they recognize the challenges people are facing. And that's a good thing. We all here, I think, would agree that we have to figure out ways to make, in challenging times, things affordable for people. And recognizing that a lot of work has happened everywhere. And when you're looking at solid waste, and the numbers here they have, $2.6 million they've saved through the hiring slowdown, the voluntary separation program, 1.5, another $500,000 on not doing the progression pay. And yes, when they were looking at how do we look at, trying to make things affordable, they did look at the calendar. And in the conversations I've had with Matt and the team, recognizing that it's not necessarily a service reduction or a cut, because they're looking at different ways to educate people, different ways to be able to provide the kind of service. And, like Councillor Pasternak and Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, I have a calendar too. It's on my fridge right now, and I'll be getting another one. I do rely on it. I do look at that, but I will be looking at other alternative ways to use that. I have the ability to use an app. I'll probably get used to that, but we have others who don't have that. But again, Matt has outlined alternatives, ways that we can change the perceptions of, what people have always expected. And it's $1 million or $900,000 on, a huge budget. It's not a big item. But when you look at this one item and you look at the dozens, if not hundreds of other items that accumulate, and we haven't seen them yet, but you will start seeing them through the budget process. And if we start making these small changes, as I said, 1 million compared to whatever the overall budget is not a big increase. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of those kind of items where staff have, they haven't reduced services, but they're looking at different ways to provide the same kind of services. And that's something we need to be doing continually as a council. So, I will be supporting the recommendations here. Of course, this will go off to full council, but I do caution us when we're looking at, here's one example of why we're trying to change a service to make it different, of course, but meet the needs of the outcomes we want. And if we start doing with this one, there'll be a lot of others that can have a cumulative effect as we go into trying to balance this year's budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Just going back to the screen now, we've got Councillor Ainsley to speak. There we are. And Councillor Nunziata. Okay. It's 27 past. I've just been looking here. We have the transit item with 5 deputants. We have to finish this. And then we have Quayside, which I don't anticipate is going to be that long, but I was just going to suggest that, just to see if I can get heads nodding, that we maybe move a motion to complete the agenda, because I think we can be complete, by 1:30 or something like that, and then have the time free. Are people in favor of that? So a motion to, no, yes. not able to do that, Councillor.
So move.
All right, okay.
I support that motion.
Deputy Mayor, bylaw, I hate to, is it nothing that can be changed by an hour?
Yeah, I'll try to.
Well, I think we can be finished here. You'd be the only one that doesn't want to do this, and I don't want to sort of say, well, too bad for you, but I just like to see if we could just, move forward and get this finished, and then we can all be off doing other things this afternoon instead of having an hour for lunch.
I will
all right. Well,
text the city manager.
I think then we'll have a motion to complete the agenda, and I think all in favor? Carried. With one opposition, one hesitation noted. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go. Councillor Ainsley, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I'm not long speaking to this. I just want to remind people that as we're on December 10th, 2020, about to move into the 21st century, that we spend $1 million annually on a paper calendar that, as our general manager of solid waste alluded to, it doesn't change very much. I do appreciate the fact that some people use it on a regular basis, but I'll be quite honest, I don't. And, as Councillor Pasternak a few moments ago held up the paper calendar that's full of information, I'm going to hold up my phone, and there's our solid waste app. The solid waste app is free. You can put it on your phone in minimal amount of time, and it's free. It doesn't cost $1 million. It has all the same information that the solid waste calendar has. We have if you have questions you can't find on the app, quick call or an email to 311. Same thing, pretty seamless, provides all the same information. I think as we're trying to make this city more livable, more affordable, make sure that people get the services that they deserve and need, spending $1 million on a paper calendar that remains largely unchanged from year to year. Like I hear from lots of people, when they're trying to figure out what to put their bins out, they don't even look at the calendar. They open up their front door, look at their front window to see what color bin their neighbors are putting out, and that's how they deal with this. So I want to commend staff for moving this forward. I want to thank them for initiating a campaign information-wise so that people will understand a year from now what they have to do when they don't get their calendar that once again is costing us $1 million. Thank you, Mayor Tory. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Councillor Ainsley, and I saw Councillor Nunziata with some comments.
Yes, just briefly, because at budget, we did discuss it at budget, and that's why I asked the question to staff. If the calendars change year to year, and basically, I do think that residents look at the pictures, and if it doesn't change year to year, they can reuse those calendars. But I just want to warn Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, if you are going to be moving that motion at council, you need to find other cuts within that budget, because the budget remains the same. And if you want to, we've discussed environment days, if you want to do that, but if you're going to increase and add that into the budget, I urge you to find the money elsewhere within that budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nunziata. Let me just see if there's anybody else wishing to speak who has not. Okay, I will just speak briefly to this, if I may, and I just started the clock. I know that there was a temptation that was sorely within me to refer to Councillors Pasternak and Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong as Luddites, but I think that would be unfair, because I think the point they're making is valid to a certain point. I know where we have our cottage. I'm not as familiar with all the arrangements there with respect to solid waste and recycling. And I refer to the calendar. It's interesting because I'm not even sure they send the written calendar anymore. I'll check and see, but I know now that I just have it on my phone. And I go to my phone every weekend and have a look at what I'm supposed to be putting out or what I'm not supposed to be putting out, or even questions that arise about the blue box and the green bin. And I realize that some of the points that were made by the Deputy Mayor in particular about some older people who don't as easily use their phone for that purpose is true, although I think we're selling a lot of the senior citizens short in that regard, because first of all, we know they all have phones, I think almost without exception. And secondly, I think they're pretty adept. I mean, my mother, who the Deputy Mayor knows well, in fact, she thinks some days that he's much more sensible than her son, and we won't put that up for debate just now. But she's 89 years old, and she uses her phone for all kinds of things. She plays bridge online. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are in that age bracket that are much more literate and comfortable with these devices than we think. So I guess, I'm not going to move any motions either, and I think it's better that people didn't just for the moment, but maybe between now and council, which is only a few days away, we might look at whether there's an opportunity to, first of all, improve communications, but without the calendar. So in other words, there may be other things. I heard Mr. Kelleher, and by the way, Mr. Kelleher and his team do an excellent job, not just with respect to this budget, but overall. If you look at what's involved in their work and how well they do it and how relatively few complaints we get, knowing there are some about things that happen or don't happen on given days of the week. I think that they might just look at maximizing communications in other ways. He made reference to the bills that go out. You know, it isn't a directly on point observation, but Deputy Mayor Wong mentioned these slips that I don't think I got for the first 5 years I was mayor, and then suddenly they started arriving, and they come every 2 weeks telling me what was deposited into my bank account. They may be a legal requirement, I don't really know, but if they're not, it may well be the case that for, you know, that's a lot of money that's spent mailing those things out to thousands of people every couple of weeks. We could look at that. I think that's a valid suggestion. And I think that we could certainly, though, look at using other tools to communicate more effectively so that councillors, if we did cancel the paper product, would feel better about that. I will also make a passing observation. As much as I realize sometimes you have to make these things bigger for some of the very same people that are seniors and so on, the thing that Councillor Pasternak held up, and I don't recall whether we received one in our house this year. I didn't see it, if we did, in our condo, but that looks like a pretty elaborate publication. So there may well be a way in which you could produce a publication if you wanted to do that and still save a lot of money. Or you could do it on a request basis and actually have people ask for the calendar, which would also save a lot of money because we're sending it out to everybody now. And I think in the city, we often feel we have to do every single program without exception universally and send everything to everybody and do everything for everybody, when in fact there are many fewer people who actually need whatever it is that we're doing. So I will just say that I hope maybe staff could take a look at all of those things, because I do associate myself with the comments of Councillor Nunziata that if we're going to just put this $900,000 back in for the calendar, then somewhere, in order to make this budget balance, we're going to have to find something else to take out. So those are my comments, and we will go forward now, I think, to vote on. Do we have any motions? We don't have any motions, so we just really have then the recommendation.
Mayor,
Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
I'm really sorry. I know that you spoke already, but I just wanted to make a quick comment
Sure.
on this issue, just because maybe staff can look into it, which is we also have the seniors calendar that we also do upon request. Maybe the departments can work together and actually have some of this information in our seniors calendars. And upon request, if the seniors needs a paper copy, that can be actually combined and all the information in one calendar.
That's an interesting idea, too. It can be added to that list of things that staff might take a look at just over the course of the time between now and council. So, on that note, then, I think we're ready here to, let me just find, I don't have the recommendation, but can we put the, I guess it's, I didn't ask you to put the staff, the Councillor Crawford, I think, would be prepared to move the staff recommendations here that come from the Budget Committee in any event, the Budget Committee's recommendations, really, and I will call the question on that if I can, then. All those in favour? Opposed? Just, okay. I think the two deputy mayors had their hand up at the same time, but I think it was just Deputy Mayor Wong that intended to vote against. Deputy Mayor Thompson was voting.
In the report, sir, I voted in favor.
Oh, you voted in favor. Okay. Then it was everybody that voted in favor, subject to the comments that were made about to council. Okay, good. Thank you. So we voted to continue on here. So that means that the next, can I just check in then? We were just about to talk about Quayside. And we then moved to this other item instead. I did. On Quayside, I think we had a couple of people that wanted to ask some questions and maybe make some comments. Okay, so I think the person who held it down was Deputy Mayor Thompson. So if we wanted to go then to him for questions of staff. Deputy Mayor, do you have a question of staff?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I wonder if through the city manager, if he could just explain the city's role as part of the Waterfront and the process that we actually have in front of us. I realize it's an update, but I just wanted to understand our role as part of Waterfront and the board.
So through the mayor, I can certainly provide a high level, but I'm going to just ask Tracy if you're there just to give a more specific answer, please.
Certainly. So through you, Mr. Mayor, as the city is one of three government parties as part of Waterfront Toronto. We're engaged with Waterfront Toronto on an ongoing basis through our Waterfront Secretariat led by David Stonehouse. Certainly we have regular executive steering committee meetings, intergovernmental meetings where Waterfront Toronto gives us updates on what they're working on, and separate and apart. And in addition, we have one that deals with Portland flood protection. What we see with Quayside specifically is the setting out of a governance structure that will focus specifically on the Quayside proposal, which will be comprised of a steering committee, some technical tables. So we're really integrated in the conversations at various levels.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful with respect to that. And maybe this is a question for Mrs. Stonehouse, what will be different with respect to Quayside? We obviously went through the sidewalk lab process and so on, and we had a lot of issues there. As part of the update here, what is the unique differences going forward that will allow for a level of confidence in terms of both in terms of the public process as well as confidence in terms of the partners, if you will, as part of the tripartite process? I know we have got a good leader at Waterfront there, but I just wanted to understand what would be the differences as such. What can the public expect?
So I'll start at a higher level through you, Mr.
Sure.
Mayor, and then ask David to chime in. Certainly what I've seen in this particular instance with Quayside, we've learned, and Waterfront Toronto certainly has taken some great learnings from the previous engagement and are engaging with us in a far more detailed way on how they're approaching this new RFQ, RFP for Quayside. In respect to the public engagement, I'll ask David Stonehouse to speak for any further on that.
Through the Mayor, Waterfront Toronto will continue to do public consultation through 2021. And I expect in terms of details well beyond 2021 as the project moves forward through implementation.
What role will Create.TO play in conjunction with Waterfront Toronto?
I'll start through you, Mr. Mayor. Create.TO is actually going to be involved as well on the steering committee related to Quayside. They represent the 1.5 acres known as Block 3 that forms part of this Quayside development. So they are absolutely at the table and actively engaged in this initiative.
Okay, those are all my questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Other questions of staff? I think I saw, where did she go? There you are. Deputy Mayor Bylaw had questions of staff.
Yes. So what you're saying here is that you're going to go out to ask for a proponent to develop the 12 acres. Is that correct?
They are.
Okay.
Through the Mayor, yes.
Okay. So you're saying that affordable housing is very important, but you're only committing to 20% of the land like in the secondary plan. Even though 3 orders of government have done several projects, like the province did West Don lands with 30%, we're doing housing now with 30%, federal has a national housing strategy. Have you been having conversations with them so that actually before you put out the land to get that proponent, you can actually bring some of the programs that could be available to get to this target?
Okay, sorry, Deputy Mayor, just before the city manager answers, you're directing your questions as if they're being directed to something that is city-sponsored here. This is a competition and whatnot that will be run by Waterfront Corporation, so I think it's perfectly fair to ask these questions here, but you've sort of been saying you to the city manager, you're running a process, and we're not actually running it, but we're certainly here to comment on it. So I just wanted to make that clear to people watching us and so on.
Thank you, Mayor. It's the group that is running this process.
Waterfront Corporation. Anyway, sorry, City Manager, I'm sorry, I just wanted to make that clear. People watching might be confused, that's all.
And through the Mayor, and thank you for that clarification. So this will be Waterfront Toronto's process. We have Create.TO involved. We have the Housing Secretariat involved, and we have encouraged very much the Waterfront Toronto to be speaking with federal and provincial officials. And, you know, it should be clear that the report speaks to a minimum of 20% because that's based on the existing approved regulations and policy documents. But in the report, we state that we'll be working with Waterfront Toronto to achieve more than the minimum 20% that is currently in place.
Okay, I'll have some comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor, no problem. Let me just get everybody back up here and see. Okay, so who else has questions of staff? Anybody? Going once, going twice? Okay, then we can move to speakers on this, and I've heard Deputy Mayor Bylaw say she wishes to speak, so you could be first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I'm somewhat disappointed with the report. This is Waterfront Toronto, which is basically an organization with 3 orders of government that have been doing a lot of work in the area of affordable housing and using their lands. Like I said, province has done West Don lands. We're doing housing now. Federal government has a program, the National Housing Strategy. And I hear there's a commitment, but I hear the commitment is going to come after we get the proponent. And I think there's no better organization than the Waterfront Toronto that has the 3 governments at the table to actually, once you go out to market, already have a strong program so that the industry can look at it and understand what kind of supports they'll have in order to provide that affordable housing. You have the federal government at the table, so why not, when you go out, ensure that CMHC commitments in there, that there's commitments from the province and the city, and you can push the boundaries. I really ask our staff to work with Waterfront Toronto more in that basis, because I feel that if we do it the other way around, we won't get as good results. We keep hearing from the industry, certainty is really important. We have the 3 orders of government at the table. Let's have those conversations so we can actually give that certainty to the market in order to push for as much as the affordable housing that we can. This will be a new community that is built in there. I know that we have several public policy priorities in here, but I think that we all understand that we're building a community. And to build a healthy community, we need to have the people that are going to be working in those areas and working in downtown being able to live in this area. And there's no better way for us to push that, as we've done ourselves in the city, that to use tools like our lands, like to use the tools when we're planning these communities to ensure, and that we've done with many secondary plans that have been coming through our committees as well, to ensure that we push this forward. So I would like to see a bit more commitment. I'm hoping that our staff can relay this message to Waterfront Toronto, because I think it's an important one. I think we've seen when governments put their land with objectives and programs in place, I think we get a better result. And I think the Waterfront could actually be a great milestone in having something with the 3 orders of government coming together and pushing for this.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Others wishing to speak on this? I just have to wait for the people to come back up on the screen for a second here. We seem to be having a little... There we are. Other speakers? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor Thompson. There we are.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to move this report, and I want to thank the folks at Waterfront Toronto and obviously all that's involved in terms of bringing this report forward. It appears to me that this is a report, as it relates to Quayside, that will engage and ensure that this area of the waterfront is going to be developed in a mixed-use way that will create features and design of great benefits to the city. We've heard from Ms. Cook and Mr. Stonehouse and others and so on around the consultation process and so on. And I know that irrespective of what has happened in the past with respect to Waterfront, one of the things that we can say about that organization, the consultation process that they had put in place was very effective, in as much as the results at the end of the day, what transpired. They are bringing forward now an opportunity for us to be engaged in all levels of city departments and so on. And so I'm very buoyed by what I see here. I did have a presentation from Waterfront staff to go through the plans, and I was quite impressed with respect to what they actually have in place. I note that with respect to the affordable housing pieces, they spoke about it, and so it appears that there is opportunity for further dialogue and to be engaged and so on. I know that they're very open to that, and I'm really excited with respect to that. I think that all of us is desirous of actually seeing something transpire here in our lifetimes, quite frankly, and I'm really excited about this. And I know as we wait for the next staff update, we will see obviously we'll have a better understanding with respect to the response from those who are interested in working with Waterfront in terms of developing this jewel of the city of Toronto. I mean, we're one of the last cities in North America that are working on developing and finalizing our development of our waterfront. It's time that we get on with it. This report obviously brings all the players together. It's a different approach from what I had seen before, and I'm really quite excited. And I think we should be really excited about this. And we may have some elements of concerns about, that what's in front of us. But what actually is really important for us to understand is that there is a tremendous effort to listen to the needs and the requirement that's needed here, and we all have a say as we move forward in terms of implementing a plan that's actually going to ensure that an element off the waterfront, the quayside area, is going to be part of this jewel that we actually have as our waterfront. But it's time that we get on with it, and I think that staff at Waterfront are in fact listening and are working really hard. The leadership there, George and his team, are doing a really great job and so on, and I just want to commend them for that, and the board of directors that are there. We have some top-notch people that are working really hard. Mr. Diamond, I believe, is still the chair of that board, and I think that if there is anything tougher than a diamond, I'm not sure what that is, but it is Mr. Diamond and his leadership team there. So I want to certainly support them, and of course, our city team here, Ms. Cook and Mr. Murray and others and so on. I mean, I don't think that they will fail us on this, as they would not fail us on any of the other initiatives that they're working on. So I'm glad that they're steady hands and innovative minds that are being brought to the process here, and I think that we'll all be very proud. I'm just hoping to see that sooner as opposed to later. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Any other people wishing to speak? Well, I'd just like to make a couple of comments on this. First of all, I want to join Councillor Thompson in saying thank you to our own staff who, they have a difficult job to do in a sense that this is land that's in our city and, it's our waterfront. But we've chosen, I think for good reason, to be partners with the other governments in developing that waterfront. And I think that's been to our benefit, and I think that, but that it puts the staff in a position where they have, less ability to kind of make recommendations to us that are hard and fast with respect to what's going to happen there. And we're having to deal with our partners, which has been, I think, generally a very good experience for us. I want to thank the staff of Waterfront Corporation. I couldn't agree more with what Deputy Mayor Thompson said about, in particular, the chair over there and the CEO. Mr. Diamond has worked tirelessly. He was briefing me this week just on some of these very same matters, and he's just worked tirelessly, and of course he does that mostly out of the goodness of his heart and out of a great love for the city, and was frankly persuaded to stay in that job at a time when he, I think, would rather have left, but I'm glad he's there. I said at the time when Sidewalk chose not to be able to reach an agreement with us, which was really, like many business things that don't come about, just a failure to agree on commercial terms. That's all it was. They were very excited about Toronto. I think they continue to think Toronto is a place of great opportunity. And of course, their broader corporate organization continues to employ hundreds and hundreds of people, and thank goodness for that, in the city of Toronto. But I said at that time, as much as I was disappointed with that outcome, that the good news for us was that the asset in question, namely a piece of land, one of the best pieces of land undeveloped on a major city waterfront in North America, maybe one of the only ones, was still there. It wasn't going anywhere. That land is still there. And the good news is, I think when you listen to people that talk about its value today, they're of the view that it is as valuable as ever. And so what now we're going to be able to do is have a second opportunity having learned some of the lessons of the first opportunity, to go out and to get a further sounding with respect to what people might like to do with that land. And we will do that, of course, in conjunction with our partners in the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario through Waterfront Toronto. And I trust both in their abilities to do this. Ms. Davis and the other people that have worked on the team down there over time will continue to do their good work. And we have learned some lessons, I'm sure, from the sidewalk experience. With regard to the home affordable housing matter, I would just say this. I think it really dovetails with what Deputy Mayor Bilo had to say, which is what you've got now, I think, is an unparalleled opportunity in that you have the three governments, unusually, as partners in this venture, all three of us having shown our commitment to affordable housing. And we now have an opportunity to do something collectively, which is something that's unprecedented. Prior to this, it's been us putting up our land and asking them to contribute money, or the province putting up its land and asking us to contribute money. Now we have a chance to do something genuinely together. Those other things have been done together. And I would only suggest that when we're urging Waterfront Corporation in the course of going through this choice of a proponent and pressing people on affordable housing as we should, that we include affordable home ownership in that too, because I think we have done a lot of things with respect to affordable rental, which is our principal need, as is supportive housing. But I think the concept of affordable home ownership is something that is attractive and interesting. And frankly, if you're using money and land, there's an opportunity to do that as well. And I think there's one more point that has been alluded to a couple of times, but I think it bears mentioning, which is that our commitment as a city and as a city council to mixed income developments, applies everywhere in the city. It doesn't apply, over here but not over there. And I think, we have to establish the principle that the waterfront is, as we've done with many of the things we've developed down there, it's for everyone. It is a unique asset, uniquely located where it is. You can't move it either. And it goes across through Scarborough and Etobicoke as well, but it's a unique asset that belongs to all of the people of Toronto. And so I just hope that we, can keep that in mind and keep in mind the comment that was made by one of our colleagues here today, which is that we want that to be a healthy community, Quayside. And we have decided, I think, as a matter of policy, that healthy communities can contain a mix of people who live there who are from different walks of life. And I think that some of the comments made today, which I hope will be passed through to Waterfront Corporation, will underline that policy that we have with respect to the development of our city and our waterfront. Even though we own it and develop it jointly with the Waterfront Corporation and our partners in government, this is our waterfront in our city. So thank you. Those would be my comments. Are we then ready to deal with the recommendation which asks the Deputy City Manager to report back to the Executive Committee after the selection of a proponent? And I think that hopefully Mr. Stonehouse and others have some comments they'll be conveying in the meantime. Those aren't recorded in the minutes, but I think they're in the minutes, as it were. Ready for the question then? Okay, so on the recommendation, I'll ask for all those in favor. Opposed? Carried. Okay, so then I think we come to our last item, which is the transit item. And we have some deputants on that, and so we'll hear from them first. Is Larry Watmore on the line? Okay, Mr. Watmore, you're first. The Scarborough Community Renewal Organization. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Thank you for your patience. We can hear you loud and clear. And so you have up to 5 minutes to make your deputation, and there may be a question or two.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the Executive Committee. My name is Larry Watmore, and I am the president of the Scarborough Community Renewal Organization, or SCRO, as we call it for short. SCRO is an organization of engaged volunteers that works to connect, promote, and renew Scarborough so that Scarborough can be strong and prosperous. We seek to renew Scarborough on multiple fronts, including strong and inclusive neighborhoods, vibrant arts and culture, an enhanced natural environment, and opportunities for economic prosperity right here in Scarborough, so that Scarborough can become a complete community where people can live, work, learn, and play. I'm here today to bring a Scarborough voice in support of the approval and funding of the Eglinton East LRT from Kennedy Station to U of T Scarborough and from there to Malvern. We believe this should be a priority project for the city because it offers significant social and economic benefits. We support this project for the following reasons. Number one, it advances the city's strong neighborhoods strategy. The route outlined in the staff report benefits 7 of the 8 neighborhood improvement areas in Scarborough, where a majority of trips to and from work are made by public transit. The LRT will bring faster and more reliable transit to our residents and shorter commutes, whether they work in other parts of Scarborough or across the city. Number two, it aligns with the ambitious growth plans of U of T Scarborough, one of Scarborough's most important anchor institutions, and it will reduce the commuting time of many of UTSC's 14,000 students. Number three, it addresses a significant public infrastructure deficit in Scarborough. This project, together with the Scarborough subway, will provide the critical infrastructure needed to serve as a catalyst for economic prosperity in Scarborough generally and in Northeast Scarborough in particular. And number four, it provides economic benefits to Scarborough businesses and our residents, especially our youth. We support the city's efforts to encourage the provision of local employment opportunities for our young people as part of the construction of public infrastructure projects like this one. So, in short, the Eglinton East LRT will help create the conditions to enhance the social and economic health of Scarborough. And a prosperous Scarborough helps to create a prosperous Toronto. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your support of this project, and we agree with you. The Eglinton East LRT will be a game changer by connecting parts of Scarborough to each other and by better connecting Scarborough to the rest of the city. And we thank the Executive Committee as well for this opportunity to bring voices from across Scarborough today in support of this project, including U of T Scarborough, the Scarborough Health Network, Centennial College, Taibu Community Health Center, the Scarborough Business Association, and others, all of whom have provided letters of support today for this important initiative. Thank you all, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wetmore. Are there any questions for the deputy? Okay, well, thank you so much for your comments. We appreciate those very much. And we will move on to the next deputant, who is Mr. Tim Cocker, the Waterfront Business Improvement Area.
Thank you, Mayor Tory, councillors of the executive. First, I'd like to congratulate Councillor McKelvey on becoming chair of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. Look forward to working together with you. Specifically, I'm here today, though, as executive director of the Waterfront BIA in support of continuing to advance design and engineering of the Waterfront Transit Network. I'd like to recognize and thank the city's transportation planning staff and their partners with TTC and Waterfront Toronto collaborating. We saw excellent progress updates at a stakeholder meeting just this Monday. We really appreciate their work to inform and gather feedback from both community groups and business groups like ours. It's good to see different phasing options being considered to get Eastern LRT connectivity in place as fast as possible. And also the report today indicates there are potential collaborations with Ontario Line Planning. We would of course like to see both transit lines in place to connect the water with even more parts of Toronto. And we thank Mayor Tory for your comments last Thursday on the importance of building out waterfront transit to support both current development and of course much more future development in the future. And that means the Portlands. Having the LRT in place would be key to unlocking development potential there beyond Quayside into the Portlands, probably the most significant opportunity in all of North America. Our waterfront BIA will actually be expanding in 2021. I included our new boundary map in our submission letter that you may have seen. The BIA now represents the business community along the entire Queens Quay corridor, all the way east to Cherry Street. That includes the Quayside site and moves our boundaries to the foot of the Portlands, where that wonderful new bridge is being installed that will carry light rail transit into the Portlands. I encourage Executive Committee to continue advancing and accelerating waterfront transit work as a way to maximize Toronto's overall growth potential as we look to recover and to connect more of Toronto with more of its beautiful waterfront. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciate your deputation. Are there questions of the deputant? Okay, well, thank you very much again. We appreciate your being here to reinforce your support for this project, which is so very important to us. Okay, I just proceeded, I think, take my list of deputants and put it into the, there it is. Next is Chris James Drew.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, we can hear you, and welcome, and you have 5 minutes to make your deputation. Thank you for your patience today, and over to you.
Thanks so much. So my name is Chris Drew, and I'm a resident in the ward of Toronto Centre in downtown Toronto, very close to the St. Lawrence Market. And I just want to first give a shout out to Tim, who just spoke. He's doing an amazing job on the Waterfront BIA. I know is a strong advocate for transit. And I also want to give a shout out to Larry, who just spoke, and his strong advocacy for Scarborough. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of aspects of my support for the Eglinton East LRT. And one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you today is Larry brought the Scarborough perspective, and I want to bring the downtown perspective, which is that I'm a downtown resident and I fully support this project for Scarborough. This needs to happen. It's a critically important project. You know, in the news over the last number of years, there's been a lot of discussion on the Scarborough subway versus LRT. And I think sometimes this project hasn't been given the same amount of attention in the public discourse or dialogue. And I just want to emphasize how important this project is. And I know there was a lot of community support in all parts of Toronto for a project near where I live, the King Street project, and I really appreciated that. And so I just wanted to lend my support for the Eglinton East LRT. I know Councillor Nunziata has been a strong supporter of the Eglinton Crosstown and the wonderful maintenance and storage facility and the Kodak site, and I fully support that. So I think it's important for Toronto residents to support each other and speak out in favor of projects that are not necessarily directly in their backyard. The other reason I'm speaking in favor of it is that this project will connect the University of Toronto's Scarborough campus. I went to Ryerson University and benefited from rail-based transit being located next to my campus, and those U of T Scarborough students deserve rail-based transit that will make it easier to get into and out of their campus. This project will also eventually connect the Malvern neighborhood, and that's a community that has seen many, many lines on the map for many, many years, and they really need to see some progress on having more rapid transit come to their neighborhood. It's a critically important part of Toronto, and I hope that they get more and faster transit soon. The other reason I'm speaking strongly in favor of the Eglinton East LRT is I got married at the Guild Inn in 2019 in Councillor Ainsley's ward, and I highly, highly recommend to all Torontonians to check out the Guild Inn as the wedding venue. It's a wonderful facility, great staff, and it's at a city park. And there were so many guests at my wedding that had never been to the Guild Inn or that part of Scarborough or Toronto before. So building more rapid transit near that facility that can allow people to get closer to it will be a great way to open up more parts of Toronto to Toronto residents and visitors. And so when I was going back and forth to the wedding venue at the Guild Inn, it was a great opportunity to see not only the neighborhoods of Eglinton East and Kingston Road, but the potential for more mixed use and more people to live and work along this LRT corridor. So I just wanted to emphasize it's an important project. I highly encourage City Council to advocate to the provincial and federal governments for funding for it. And there are people, many people in Toronto who may not necessarily live along the route or use it every day, like myself from downtown, who fully support this surface LRT project in Scarborough. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for that deputation, Mr. Drew. And are there any questions of the deputy? Seeing none, I'll thank you so much for being with us today. Next, we have Lee Soda, Executive Director, Asian Court Community Services Associations. Ms. Soda on the line? Okay, over to you. Lee, welcome, and you have up to 5 minutes. We are glad to have you here, and then there may be some questions.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. Thank you.
Awesome. My name is Lee Soda, and as Mr. Mayor said, I'm the Executive Director at Asian Court Community Services Association, or ACSA, and also a proud Scarborough resident for over 25 years. I'm speaking to you today to support and to urge Council to ensure that the Eglinton East LRT project is deemed a priority transit project, and that you will call on City Council to vote in favor of funding the Eglinton East LRT and to ensure that it extends into Malvern. ACSA, as we are known, is a Scarborough-based community agency in operation since the early 1970s that puts community at the center of all of the work that we do and propelled by the belief that we must ensure that decisions that affect all parts of our city should and must be inclusive of marginalized and underrepresented communities and reflective of the diversity of our city, and that we collectively include opportunities for economic prosperity for our diverse and vibrant community members. As one of the largest geographic areas, Scarborough, within the City of Toronto, transit is critically important to connect our residents to employment across our great city of Toronto. Residents in the northern part of Scarborough will tell you that they have one of the longest transit commute times in the city. As a North Scarborough resident myself, I can definitely attest to this. The 24-stop Eglinton East LRT would be an investment in city building and ensuring that thousands of Scarborough residents, including those living in a number of the underserved neighborhoods along with students attending 2 post-secondary institutions, could be connected to the city's rapid transit network. This deputation brings voice to the interests of Scarborough residents in support of the advancement and approval of the Eglinton Avenue East LRT. This long overdue project should be a priority project for the City of Toronto because of the significant social and economic benefits. This is a rich opportunity for a community benefits framework and increased economic benefits to Scarborough businesses and residents, especially for our young people who have experienced higher burdens during this pandemic. We support the city's efforts to hire locally during the construction of the infrastructure projects like this and ensure that a community benefits project framework is firmly in place prior or from the onset to ensure residents who live in Scarborough have access to employment opportunities through the Eglinton East LRT. We continue to hear the roars, respectfully, from Scarborough residents that the City of Toronto needs to invest in rapid public transit infrastructure that is responsive to the needs of all regions that make up the City of Toronto, including Scarborough, which is home to over 630 of Toronto residents. This project also speaks to the city's strong neighborhood strategy. The construction of the Eglinton East LRT would help to address the transport poverty that exists in Scarborough, especially in neighborhoods like Malvern, Scarborough Village, Kingston, Galloway, all identified as NIAs or neighborhood improvement areas. We know that access to rapid transit significantly shapes people's socioeconomic opportunities. The Eglinton East LRT would enable Scarborough residents access to more employment opportunities and encourage local socioeconomic development. I urge you, please, to ensure that the Eglinton East LRT is a priority transit project and fully funded by the City of Toronto so that we can see construction begin on this line to support our communities and our city's future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Soda. Are there any questions of the Deputy? Well, thank you very much for being with us and for those comments, which certainly come from a deep pool of experience and direct contact with a lot of the neighborhoods in question. Last but not least for the day in terms of deputations is Kirsten Marwa. Not with us. Okay, so I guess that Ms. Marwa is not here at this moment in time, so that would be the end of the deputations then. And we could move to questions of staff, and Councillor McKelvey is in here with us, so you're first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My first question is about the cost escalation that we see here of $1.7 billion. Now, I was wondering if staff could quickly break this down into the buckets it's associated with. Some of them are new costs from design, but some of them are attributed to the cancellation of the the Shepherd LRT and those costs now being moved onto the Eglinton East LRT. So could you just break that down into those different buckets and specifically, what is the new design money needed?
Through the mayor, the increases are related to a number of different factors, as you mentioned, Councillor. So there is the change that we had to make to the connection at Kennedy Station because of the updated design of the Scarborough subway extension and what we were planning for the tunnel connection there no longer worked, and so that led to a redesign of the tunnel and an increase. Probably represents about 20% of the roughly 20% of the increased costs that show in the figures. At the other end of the line, up in the Malvern area, we had been planning to piggyback on the infrastructure that would be put in place for the Shepherd LRT for a good section of the line that would be going to Malvern. And now with that project not advancing, or certainly not advancing before the Eglinton East LRT with the decision to extend the Shepherd subway, we now need to assume those costs in this project. We also will need to assume the full costs of the maintenance and storage facility for the line, because again, we can't piggyback on the maintenance and storage facility that would have been in place for the Shepherd LRT. The other thing that we did in work with a consultant and with TTC was to look at review the costs in terms of what we're seeing in comparable projects across the region, and also TTC standards on a number of elements of construction, and so saw the need to increase the estimate to match what we're seeing across the region, comparable projects like the Ontario LRT or other projects like that.
Okay, so some of these costs are associated with the change in the provincial plans that now move forward with the subway extension to McCowan and changes in design that happen with that, as well as the Shepherd subway, correct? So that's part of the reason for these additional costs.
Through the chair, that is correct, Councillor.
Okay, two other questions. What does phasing mean? And you know that I'm very uncomfortable with the word phasing. Yes. So can you maybe explain very clearly what that means? And the second is, what is the status of your discussion about the location of the storage facility with the University of Toronto Scarborough campus? Because they have great growth plans there. And obviously part of building transit is to allow for economic development such as that. So can you just speak to those two questions as well?
Through the mayor. Yes, Councillor, we understand Council's direction from the last time that this line will go extend all the way to Malvern. What we are looking at in this concept of phasing is not going to UTSC and then stopping, but looking at what could be an operational section of the line. We could get to UTSC while we're continuing to take the line up to Malvern, and things could start to operate while we're continuing the work up the line. So it's more like staging, I would suggest, as opposed to phasing. And then in terms of the conversations with UTSC, when we last came to council on this report, UTSC did raise some concerns about the access into the proposed maintenance and storage facility just north of their campus. In conversations with UTSC, they are not opposed to having the maintenance and storage facility there. They just want to ensure that the access route does not disrupt their development plans. And we have made a commitment that as we go through the next stages of design, we will avoid the entrance or the proposed access that was causing them problems for their development, and redirect the access to the MSF so that it works with their development and the realignment of Military Trail.
Okay, thank you. So I'll take it that those conversations will continue.
Through the mayor, yes, they will.
Okay, thank you.
Those are all your questions, Councillor McKelvey. Thank you very much. Who else has questions of staff on this report? Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. Through you, so James, could you just reiterate so there's a 20% increase in costing, and then there's another increase in costing in the Malvern area because the subway, the scenario around the Shepherd Avenue LRT. So is it safe to say that's about 30% cost increase?
Through the mayor, some of your question didn't come through to me, Councillor, but I think I understand where you're going, so I will attempt an answer. So yes, what I was explaining before, a significant additional cost is related to the change we need to make at Kennedy Station and the connection of the LRT into Kennedy Station. We now need to tunnel a little bit further out to Midland in order to avoid the Scarborough Subway extension tunnel that will be in that area as well. And then the other,
Okay.
and then
Sorry,
at the
James,
north,
and then
yeah.
sorry, I understand. Sorry. So then, can you also explain to me? So the subway extension in Scarborough, the agreement that we have with the province is they're fully paying for it. So is there not any way we can go back on the province and say, you know, your subway line has just increased our costs by close to $1 billion?
So through the mayor, the increase related to that is not $1 billion. The increase related to that is more in the neighborhood of 350 million of that amount that we show in the report.
So can we not go back to the province for that?
Through the mayor, in terms of conversations around funding, there may be political discussions that council wants to engage in about funding. Derek Toigo may have some other insights or answers on the funding questions.
Okay, and then the $4.4 billion cost at that, so that's in today's dollars, 2020 dollars?
Through the mayor, yes, that is correct, 2020 dollars.
Okay, and so the expected timeline, if we got funding, was construction would start in 2024. Is there any idea what this will look like in 2024 dollars?
Through the mayor, we haven't escalated through into construction because we need to go through more detailed design. So this is still a class 4 cost estimate based on 5 to 10% design, and we'll be undertaking that work on the more detailed design and have a more reliable cost estimate and one that we can calendarize. We also need to work out the timelines for construction and how it fits with all that's going on in the Scarborough area with the subway.
So I know there's a number of different costs. They're looking at how to bridge over the Highland Creek Ravine along Morningside to get to UTSC. There's also the question around the bridge work over the 401 at Morningside. So none of those costs are still being established, correct?
Yes, yeah. Through the mayor, those costs, although those elements are included in this. We are working with MTO about the rehabilitation of the Morningside Bridge over the 401 and making sure that as they're moving ahead with their rehabilitation work, that they're taking account of the needs, the design requirements for the LRT. And so there was a slight increase in the costs on that element to better reflect what may happen with that bridge.
Okay, and how much money do we have in the bank for this project to date?
Through the mayor, there has been no formal allocation of funds to this project yet. The capital funds. There is often a reference to the Scarborough Transit Fund, the levy that was on the property tax, and what that would provide toward this, the amount that could be leveraged there. But we will be coming back in the next stages with a fuller funding and financing strategy for the project.
And when will you be coming back with that part of the strategy?
Final question.
Through the mayor, we will be reporting back for the 2022 budget process to launch more detailed design. We will also be, and so at that point we can talk in more detail about the opportunities or the funds that may be available. That also opens opportunities for other discussions to be happening.
Okay, thanks, James. I appreciate your answers, and Mayor Tory, those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Other questions of staff? Okay. Councillor Perks, I saw you arrived after we had our you're okay. All right, good enough. Thanks a lot. Okay, so then we move on to speakers. And who can I just have a show of hands who I want to put on that list? You'd be first, Councillor McKelvey, obviously. So why don't we just turn to you, and others can indicate their wish as we go. And so off you go, Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am very excited by this report today. It is a step in the right direction for this project, but clearly we have a long way to go. But it is important that we put our pedal on the gas right now, because we do know that there is going to be significant economic stimulus from our government partners in the spring. And frankly, if we don't work to get this funded right now, the door is going to close on funding as the national debt skyrocket, and it could be a decade before there is that opportunity again. So this report is a step in the right direction, and we have a long way to go. What I want to draw your attention to is the 12 agencies that have sent letters of support for the Eglinton East LRT. There are letters from our 3 anchor institutions, the University of Toronto Scarborough, Centennial College, and the Scarborough Health Network. Collectively, they represent 15,000 staff, 35,000 students, and 500,000 patients that go through their institutions every year. In addition, there's letters from community support agencies, including TIBU, the Aging Court Community Services, Scarborough Transit Action, Scarborough Civic Action Network, Scarborough Business Association, as well as the Scarborough Community Renewal Organization, Centennial Community Association, West Rouge Association, and 42 Voices. Scarborough stands together united in advocating to advance the Eglinton East LRT. I do want to end, though, with, of all the different remarks, there was one that I want to draw your attention to from TIBU. And TIBU says, a key strategic investment to address the inequities that are impacting Scarborough's Black and Indigenous communities is investing in access to affordable transportation. The Eglinton East LRT is therefore a critical investment in Scarborough and in Malvern. Thank you so much to the deputants that submitted letters and came forward today. I will continue to do everything I can to champion this important project. I know that Mayor Tory has spoken so strongly in support of his views on this project as well, and let's hope that hopefully we can get this across the finish line very soon.
Thank you, Councillor McKelvey. Others wishing to speak? Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I will be brief. First, I want to thank staff for their continued work on this. I want to thank Mayor Tory for your ongoing advocacy for this. Often I'm speaking with MPPs, in particular MPs in the Scarborough area, which are asking for enhanced transit. And I know that you've been at their federal Liberal caucus numerous times where this has been raised, and you've stressed the importance of it to Eastern Scarborough. And I want to thank you for that. I am a little frustrated by the increased cost. The Scarborough subway extension continues to drive up the cost of the Eglinton East LRT one way or another. In this report, it's driving it up by close to $400 million. So it's frustrating, but I do know as we move forward, and I'll use the Golden Mile area of the Eglinton LRT that runs through Deputy Mayor Thompson's ward, and the redevelopment and the excitement that it's bringing to that area. And I know it will do the same along Eglinton Avenue and Morningside up to the University of Toronto Scarborough, where students years ago had a levy put on their tuition to help pay for the Pan Am Games Center, TPASC, because they were promised an LRT. So I know they will be very excited about it at University of Toronto Scarborough. This LRT, which runs through a good part of my ward, runs through 5 neighborhood improvement areas. I know the residents are looking for better transit to get from point A to point B, and this LRT will go a long way to delivering that needed transit. So I want to thank everybody for their continued advocacy on this. We're moving another step forward, and I look forward to one day seeing a shovel in the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Let's go back to the screen here and see, are there others wishing to speak? Okay, well, I might just say a word if I can, and let me just reset the clock here. First of all, I just want to thank the staff and I want to thank the councillors and I want to thank the MPs from Scarborough. The councillors have been steadfast, all of them, in their support for what I think is an extremely important project for the whole city, but especially for Scarborough. The staff have worked long and hard on this, and it's gone through various evolutions over time, but I think it is moving forward, albeit at a pace that might be a bit slower than we want. But that could be accelerated by what Councillor McKelvey made reference to, and she's certainly been, one of the lead fighters for this, which is that I think there are going to be some unprecedented opportunities to help to get financial support for this project for a couple of reasons. I mean, one is the kind of post-pandemic stimulus that I think the federal government will be looking to do, and I think this fits in as well with some of their other agendas, including fighting climate change, because of course this is going to take people out of cars to some extent, albeit for a lot of people I think it'll be more of an opportunity to get around for people who don't have cars. But having said all that, I think it will contribute to a cleaner way of getting around. And I think there's an unprecedented consensus. I think what you have here is MPs from Scarborough, but MPs from across Toronto who understand the importance of this project, because I have met with them repeatedly and it comes up every single time I meet with them, as recently as this past Monday when I meet with all the members of Parliament from the Toronto area. I think that it's interesting because we spent more time talking about in the speeches and so on about the Scarborough Eglinton East LRT, perhaps because Scarborough has gone for, it's not an exaggeration to say, generations without adequate investment in transit, without adequate investment in healthcare for that matter. Really, I've got quite into that in trying to help the Scarborough Health Network with them and their plans to rebuild and renew. And if you look at the record there, it's really just something you can't believe was allowed to go on for as long as it did. But the same is true of transit. While we had various fights down here and while things just didn't happen. But I think what's interesting is these two projects, which I would say are the two biggest, Waterfront Transit generally and Scarborough East, Eglinton East LRT, they both actually have very similar characteristics, albeit that they run through different areas. Both are going to connect communities up to the city in a better way and connect communities up to each other. And again, I've said many times that we're running the risk with the waterfront that we're going to allow all kinds of development to take place there. You just have to go out to Councillor Grimes' ward and see Humber Bay Shores, which actually is a spectacular sort of high-rise vertical neighborhood with some great parks and so on, but the development was put there over a period of many years without adequate transit. And now it rests in front of us to fix that. And that was something he and I were talking about just the other day as part of our midterm review. In this case, in Scarborough, you have a lot of people who move around Scarborough, within Scarborough, 625,000 residents, as has been pointed out, tens of thousands of students and patients and other people, professionals, doctors, nurses. And so those communities are both disconnected from each other because of a lack of transit over the course of the years. The second thing that this will do in both cases is connect people to opportunity. Because let's not forget, quite deliberately, we have directed that a lot of the development that happens along the lakefront is development that will provide either places to study or places to work in addition to places to live and places to enjoy recreation. And more to come. There's some very exciting ideas that are coming forward with respect to the waterfront and recreation there. And so this transit, again, will provide us with the opportunity both on the waterfront and in Scarborough to connect people to opportunity and people to recreation and people to places to study. And I think when you look at Centennial, when you look at Scarborough College U of T, I remember when I was going to university, and I realized that's sort of ancient history, but the Scarborough U of T campus was just being established then, and it was a tiny, tiny place, relatively speaking. It was like an outpost of the U of T, and today it is a thriving campus with incredibly rich resources, both in terms of the student body and the faculty, and of course located right next door to the Pan Am Games, a magnificent sports facility, the likes of which we don't have in any other part of the city. And I think if you look at these two projects as well, so they carry with them the benefit of economic development that will come with them. There is no question it's going to cause people to invest. The opportunity of connecting people up to economic opportunity, and I think there will be substantial environmental benefits in both cases as well. So I think these are two projects where I know there will be people in other parts of the city who will say, well, why are my dollars going to invest in waterfront transit? I don't live anywhere near there. I don't go there. Or conversely, the same about Scarborough. I can remember a debate I had in the 2014 mayoralty election where somebody actually raised the notion of saying, well, why should Toronto taxpayers pay to build transit in that part of town? And that's because it's all for one and one for all. And I think a lot of that kind of talk has died down as we've realized we are one city. We've got to make sure every part of that city develops into healthy communities, to use an expression that was used earlier about Quayside. Healthy communities on the waterfront, healthy communities in Scarborough. And these two projects will go a long way to making sure that happens. So I think this is a step forward. We're not approving it today, but we're moving it forward. And I think we've got to keep doing that and take advantage of the consensus that exists today to get this going, both of these projects going. Thank you very much for your attention. Anybody else wishing to speak? Okay, let me just find so it is item 19.5, our last of the day, and I'm just turning the page here, and you have a recommendation in front of you that applies to both of the Eglinton East and Waterfront Transit networks to approve updated design. This is asking council to do so and to continue with the work on an updated business case prior to the 22 budget, and then the same basically with the Waterfront Transit to come back with further recommended schedules and funding requirements prior to the 22 budget, and that City Council send this report along to the GTC. So that's what's in front of us, and if you're ready, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Recorded vote, please.
Recorded vote, okay.
All those in favor? Mayor Tory? Councillor Blau? Councillor Ainsley? Councillor Nunziata? Councillor Pasternak? Councillor Thompson? Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, are you voting in favor? And Councillor Crawford? Councillor Crawford's not present. That carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think yes, thank you all very much. And I think that completes our business for the day, if I'm not mistaken, unless there's any other business anybody wants to raise. We dealt with already, I think, sending the matter to the Budget Committee, the police matter. Okay. Well, if there's no other business, I will say thank you all very much, and this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.